Chapter 24, Enzo. Standing at the grill with the tongs in my hand, I replayed the first night I met Shanna. From the moment I'd seen her in that tight-fitting emerald green gown, I'd wanted to know what she hid beneath the velvet. But when her laughter had drifted across the night air, I wanted more than her body. Shanna had intrigued me. She hadn't been like the other women at the gala. Even in her ridiculous feathered mask, she'd thrown her head back and laughed as if she didn't give a damn what anyone thought. What would it feel like to live so damned free? "How are the steaks coming?" Marco motioned to the grill with a half-empty bottle of beer. "Smells like they're burning." Son of a bitch. I fumbled to remove the meat from the flames. "I'd ask where your head is, but it's obvious." I ignored him. "Come on, Enzo. A blind man could see you're in love with her." He nudged my shoulder. "What are you going to do about it?" "Enjoy it while it lasts and let her go when it ends." The words tasted like ash on my tongue. "That's fucking cold, even for you." He shook his head. "What about her? Have you thought about her feelings?" I turned to tell him to mind his own business, but didn't get the chance. Female voices, loud, angry female voices, spilled out the sliding glass doors. Oh, crap. In his haste to get inside, Marco tripped over a lounge chair. He went one way and the beer bottle went the other. "Get in there before one of them bleeds on Ma's white rugs." "You're not welcome here," Shanna shouted. "Cat killer? Who are you to say? You're nothing more than Enzo's whore." I recognized Nico's voice instantly. "What the hell is she doing here?" "Go." Marco grabbed a towel from a nearby chair and pressed it to the gash on his leg. I ran through the house and came to a screeching halt in the foyer. Shanna and Nico stood a foot apart, glaring at each other. Meanwhile, Hildy looked on with her back against the wall and her hand pressed to her chest. I steeled my nerves, cleared my throat, and waded into the oncoming cage match. "Shanna, please, go help Marco." She moved her eyes in my direction. "With what?" "He cut his leg and may need stitches." I motioned to Hildy. "Go with her and get the first aid kit." Nico flashed Shanna a triumphant smile. I had zero intention of letting her put Shanna down or allowing her to believe she had the upper hand. "Nicolina, you were asked to leave." Other than a quick wince, Shanna had the grace not to smirk or comment or otherwise inflame the situation. Instead, she nodded and followed Hildy. Nico's mouth fell open. "But I was invited." "By whom?" I folded my arms. "Marco." Her voice quivered, but I wasn't buying it. I'd witnessed similar performances in the past. "Regardless, you're going to have to leave." I made a mental note to throttle my little brother. Her shoulders sagged. "Enzo, please. We need to talk." "You're right, we do, but it isn't going to happen tonight, and not here." I hated treating a woman so rudely, but Nico wasn't just any woman. She was the principessa of the family who seemed hell-bent on destroying Shanna's life, not to mention mine. "I have nowhere else to go." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Nope, not going to work, sweetheart. You weren't in this house 10 seconds before you insulted Shanna." "She insulted me first." I didn't believe her. Should I call Hildy back and ask her? "No." Nico deflated. Her head down, shoulders curled in, arms wrapped around her waist. She leaned forward. "I'll apologize to her. Please, let me stay. I'm in trouble, Enzo. If my family finds out I'm here..." "What? They'll disown you?" Days of frustration poured out of me. "I'm not buying it. Since you showed up at the engagement party, it's been non-stop chaos." "I know, and I'm sorry. Between my father and your mother, I couldn't take it anymore. I acted like a complete psycho, so you'd throw me out. I thought if Evelyn saw how awful we were together..." "You're telling me you staged everything?" While in a twisted way it made sense, her explanation fell short. "Did it ever occur to you to tell me the truth?" "I couldn't risk you confronting your mother." She lowered her voice. "She's been conspiring with my father for months." My mother working with Pietro Lazio didn't surprise me. She'd always wanted me to marry Nico. However, I highly doubted Evelyn would order someone to shoot at me or commit arson. "What did you hope to gain by setting Shauna's apartment on fire? How about my restaurant? Did you think if it was gone I'd marry you?" "What are you talking about?" Nico took a step back. "What's happened?" "Leave, Nico." I pushed past her and opened the door. Shanna returned to the foyer. "Enzo, let her stay." I had no idea how much of the conversation she'd overheard or what would make her soften toward Nico. "Why would I do that?" Because I asked you to. We need answers, and she clearly needs our help. Nico stared at Shanna as if she were the Madonna. One night. I turned to retrieve the half-dozen suitcases Nicolina usually brought along. The porch was empty. Confused, I checked the drive for a cab, but found none. Where are your things? Nico shook her head without meeting my gaze. The reality of the situation sucker-punched me. I might not have liked the woman she'd turned into, but I'd grown up with the girl she used to be. Nico was in trouble, and I'd almost put her out on the street. We're about to sit down for dinner. Are you hungry? Famished. She wiped her eyes and stood straighter. I'm filthy. Would you mind if I cleaned up first? You can sleep in Gabe's old room. I suggested his room for 2 reasons. It had a private bath, and it was the farthest from mine. Shanna glanced between us and sighed. I have some clothes here, if you'd like to borrow something. Thank you, Nico whispered. Shanna wrapped her arm around the other woman's shoulders and guided her toward the stairs. I stared until they reached the top, shook my head, and went to find Marco. He had some explaining to do. Thankfully, Hildy had taken control of dinner, otherwise we'd be eating sandwiches. She frowned at me and placed tomato slices on top of mozzarella cheese medallions. Your steaks are in the oven under the warmer. Thanks. I took a step toward the patio. You have a mess on your hands? She spoke without looking up from the bunch of basil she was murdering. I'm aware. Do you know how you're going to fix it? I scratched my jaw. I don't have all of the information I need to decide my next move. Hildy slammed the knife onto the counter and marched around the island. Hands on her hips, she stared up at me. Lorenzo Valente Marchionni, don't be a fool. She tapped my chest. Everything you need to know is in here. My brows climbed into my hairline. She hadn't used my middle name since I'd turned 10. Until that moment, I hadn't realized how much she and Shanna were alike. Tiny spitfires that took zero shit, but would give the shirts off their backs to help a person in need. You're right. I drew her into an embrace. But you've been with this family long enough to know what we want and our obligations don't always line up. She turned away. Then maybe it's time you start thinking about what you want instead of what's best for this family. Maybe. I left her in the kitchen and walked outside. Marco sat in the same chair he tripped over. He had his bandaged leg propped up on a pillow and his arm draped over his face. It would have been nice to have a little warning you invited Nico to stay here. I sank into a nearby chair and forced Hildy's advice to the back of my mind for the time being. I planned to, but we started talking about the security footage. Then Shanna showed up. And after she went to check on Hildy, he shrugged. I was stout. I could respect the fact he'd owned up to his cowardice instead of giving me some bullshit story. Do you need stitches? It wasn't that big a cut. Hildy patched me up with a couple of Steri-strips. He turned to me. Where are the women? Shanna took Nico upstairs to find some clean clothes. His eyes widened. She didn't have any with her? Not even a purse. Damn. I knew things were bad, but Nico without a wardrobe is apocalyptic level bad. She's desperate. He had a point, but I needed the full picture before I let him or Nico off the hook. Why is she here? I offered her a place to stay because she had nowhere else to go. Think about it. She's running from an arranged marriage. The last place anyone will look for her is with the person she's being forced to marry. I couldn't argue with his logic, but that didn't mean I had to like it. But her running doesn't add up. She all but proposed to me in Sicily, and that was well before her father made any demands. It sounds like a chicken and egg argument to me. He picked at his bandages. But our mother and the Lazios were putting pressure on her to make this happen more naturally. I huffed out a humorless laugh. There was nothing natural about the way she went about it. Exactly. When has Nico ever acted that desperate? She's not hurting for male attention. Why else would she stick around after you rejected her? You may be right. I needed to have a conversation with Nicolina, but first I had to find a way to tell Shanna the entire story. Like I said before, Nico's as much a victim in this thing between our families as you and Shanna. Do yourself a favor and don't say that in front of Shanna. She's lost her job, everything she owns, and her cat. I narrowed my eyes. Don't suppose you have any idea what could have changed her mind about Nico? Marco ran his hand over the back of his neck. I may have mentioned that Nico was on the run from her father. Part of me wanted to strangle him, and part wanted to hug him for not mentioning the Lazio's demand that Nico and I get married. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked the screen and frowned. It's Pops. We will finish the conversation. Looking forward to it. Marco deadpanned and draped his arm back across his face. I had a good idea why he'd called. To soften him up a bit, I answered the phone in the Italian tradition. Pronto. Walk into the office and close the door. We have matters to discuss. For a man reliant on oxygen to breathe, he did a great job of shouting. Over the years, I had excelled at two things: cooking and following orders. I waited until I closed the door behind me before I replied. I'm here. Your brother told you what the Lazios want? Money, time, and a wedding. I trust you will do what is expected of you. He wheezed and broke into a coughing fit. A million thoughts crossed my mind while my dying father gasped for air on the other end of the line. The rush I got while working in my kitchen. Years of feeling not good enough, of starving for attention, longing for a pat on the head, and an attaboy. My mother's disapproving stare. Watching my brothers laugh and play together. Hildy's advice. Shauna whispering she loved me. His coughing eased. Gabe won't ask this of you, but you and I both know the only way to end this standoff is to tie the families together. There's another way. If I had to sell my soul, I'd rather sell it to the mafia than the devil in stilettos. Besides, if things worked out the way I hoped, I wouldn't take over the Marchionni empire alone. I'd have a sexy, brilliant woman by my side to help break us free. Name me as your successor. I'll take care of the business and the people in Comiso. Gabe and the others can go legit. I want your word you'll marry Nico. He'd either ignored me or hadn't heard. I prayed for the latter. Pops, let me take Gabe's place. No one is taking anyone's place. Your role in this family is to marry Nicolina. If you refuse, then you are on your own. My father disconnected the call. I slammed the phone on the desk. God damn it. The phone rang again. I snatched it from the desk. What else could he possibly have to say to me? Yeah. Is that how you answer your mother? Evelyn's voice crackled through the line. Ma? We have a bad connection. I debated hanging up and blaming it on faulty cell service. I know you're with that Shanna girl. I saw the proof with my own eyes. She blew out an exasperated sigh. Isaac is a Jewish name. Did you bother to ask if she was Catholic? Her religion doesn't matter. It matters to your father and me. I won't have Jewish grandchildren. I love her. The fact the words rolled off my tongue as easily as stating the sky was blue or water was wet scared the hell out of me. Knowing something was true and facing the implications were two very different things. You don't know the meaning of the word. Love is sacrifice, not licking wine off a body. 1 week. You have 1 week to put an end to it and marry Nicolina in her family's church. I can't do that. First, my father had dismissed my idea without bothering to discuss it and had sold me off like a fucking brood mare. Now, this? Hildy's right. It's time I start thinking about me for a change. She isn't for you, Lorenzo. I know the two of you have been through a lot in the last week, but don't mistake it for more than it is. I'm a grown man. I know the difference between being in love with someone and sympathy. She sighed and went for the kinder, gentler approach. I know you. You have a big heart. You're taking care of that girl. This is like when you brought home that mongrel dog. Is she seriously comparing Shauna to a stray puppy? I'd heard enough. Ma, this is nothing like bringing home a stray puppy. Think about it. Think what a marriage to Nico would mean. What the hell is she talking about? Besides being roped into a relationship Nico and I don't want, you'd grow to love her over time. My mother lowered her voice to a conspirator's level. You could have everything you want. With the Lazios backing you, you could take over for your father here in Sicily. My grip on the phone tightened. Is she fucking serious? Gabe is getting us out. Gabe is letting his love for Maggie and the kids get in the way of common sense. You are smart. Smart enough to know it's impossible to walk away from this life. I'd heard enough. She'd all but admitted she was working against my brothers. Worse, she expected me to do the same. Are you listening to yourself? You're suggesting I stage a coup against my own brother? Don't you understand? She sighed. Once you're in charge, you will have the authority to allow Gabe to go free. This marriage is the only way everyone gets what they want without bloodshed. Everyone except me, Nico, and my father. Not 5 minutes ago, Pop shot me down when I asked him to name me his successor. Your father's dying. Her voice cracked. Would you see me bury your brothers too? Pinching the bridge of my nose, I sucked in a deep breath. No, she sniffled into the phone. I want you to be happy, but that Jewish girl is trouble. Goodbye, Ma. I disconnected the phone.
Chapter 25. Shanna. A week ago, if anyone would have told me Nicolina Lazio would be wearing my clothes while sobbing against my shoulder, I would have thought they were insane. To say she wasn't exactly the kind of person I normally befriended was like saying sharks and baby seals had minor differences in opinions. Thank you for interceding with Enzo. You're the last person I thought would help me. Nico blotted her eyes with a tissue. No kidding. I handed her the box of Kleenex. You being here is a strange twist of fate, I'll give you that. You have to understand, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. She bowed her head. But my father... No way could I let her completely off the hook, not with Mr. Bouguer still missing or dead. But I could extend an olive branch for the sake of peace in the house. I can't forgive you or your family for everything you've done to me, but I'm willing to try to give you the benefit of the doubt. Thank you. Nico tilted her head as if confused. I know it can't be easy to be with Enzo when he doesn't have control over his own future. But what was he talking about downstairs? What shooting and fire? Is she serious? You know about the shooting in Ragusa. You were there when Gabe dragged everyone back to the villa. My father said the Abruzzos were responsible for the warning shots. Nico crumpled the mascara-stained tissue. Was he dishonest with me about that, too? Maybe, but we should discuss this with the guys. I moved to the chair beside the window so I could better gauge her reactions. Enzo had warned me not to jump to conclusions, but I wasn't exactly making the leap alone. We both believed the Lazios were responsible. What do you know about the armed man at Gabe's wedding? My father said the Abruzzos were responsible for that as well. Enzo said there was a fire? My apartment was destroyed. I hated how my voice quivered. My cat was killed or ran away. Nico covered her mouth. That's horrific. I'm so sorry for your loss. I couldn't trust her. Not yet. She seemed sincere, but it could have been an act. Without the benefit of makeup and designer clothes, she appeared younger, almost innocent. Your family had nothing to do with it? No, she shook her head. You have no reason to believe me after the way I've treated you. But my father would never do such a thing to a woman just because she was sleeping with his enemy. I squashed the instinct to defend my relationship with Enzo. It was none of her business, and I had more important things to focus on. Your father considers Enzo an enemy? The situation is complicated. Nico dipped her chin. Complicated enough that your father had his restaurant trashed? I don't know. Sensing I wouldn't get anything else out of her, I stood. Let's go downstairs. Enzo should be part of this conversation. He won't believe anything I have to say. He hates me now. She sighed and walked to the door. I didn't know how to respond to her, so I kept my mouth shut. Since getting involved with the Marchionnis, my life felt like putting together a jigsaw puzzle without any of the straight-edge pieces. I had no framework, no guide, no freaking clue if the picture was a sunset or a battle scene. All I knew for certain was that most of the pieces were shades of red. Following Nico down the back staircase to the kitchen, I struggled to keep my jealousy in check. Regardless of who'd invited her, she'd obviously spent a lot of time in the mansion. Sitting beside the pool, Marco grinned and nodded toward us. Enzo turned and winked at me before giving Nico a once-over. She must have caught him staring, because she folded her arms and hunched her shoulders. I can't remember the last time I left my room without makeup on. Don't worry about it. We're not going anywhere. I hadn't bothered with anything more than a swipe of mascara and lip gloss since the wedding. I couldn't wrap my head around someone as beautiful as her needing war paint to face the world. Is it an Italian thing? A rich person thing? Or is she that insecure? I stepped outside and breathed in the scent of grilled meat. The steaks smell amazing. Dinner's almost ready. We're waiting on the potatoes. Enzo stood and embraced me so hard I could barely breathe. I pulled back enough to meet his gaze and opened my mouth to ask what had happened. Before I formed the words, he frowned and shook his head a fraction of an inch. Marco waved to Nicolina. "Grab a beer and join me." She wrinkled her nose. "I'll have wine." "You know where to find it." Enzo spoke without sparing a glance in her direction. In fact, he hadn't taken his eyes off me since I'd walked outside. "Thank you." "What for?" Still holding him, I rose to tiptoe and kissed his jaw. Nuzzling his stubbly cheek against mine, he whispered, "For being kind when I couldn't be." I doubted any poet who'd ever penned a stanza could have made me feel as warm and fuzzy as he had in that moment. "Don't sell yourself short, Marchionni." Brushing his lips across mine, he whispered, "Come inside with me. I need you." Hearing him utter those words, in his bedroom voice, sent my already soaring heart into the stratosphere. I would have gone anywhere with him. But first, I have to check on the potatoes. He flashed me a naughty smile. And that, folks, is how poetry died. I laughed and followed him into the kitchen. Enzo opened the microwave. "I can't believe a bona fide chef cooks potatoes in the microwave." "Only when in a hurry." He chuckled. "Would you carry the caprese salad and steaks to the patio table?" "Sure." I rested the platter in the crook of my elbow, the steaks in my left hand, and grabbed an olive plate with my right. Enzo met me outside with the rest of the food. "I'm definitely putting you to work when the restaurant reopens. I have veteran waitresses who can't manage multiple items as well as you just did." "I've waited tables before." I grinned and glanced over the spread. The food looked like it belonged on the cover of a magazine, not an impromptu cookout. "So have I." I arched a brow. "A Marchionni waiting tables? Are you serious?" "Pops made all of us work in his supper club growing up. Everyone except Dante. He was too young." He called over to Marco. "I hope you don't expect me to serve you because you have a little boo-boo." "I'm coming." Marco stood, and the color drained from his face. The guy was in real pain. I shook my head at the brothers. "Sit down, I'll bring you a plate." Marco smirked. "At least someone in this house is nice to me." Nico whispered something to him. He replied with a wink. "That's interesting." I glanced back at Enzo to get his take on their interaction, but he was busy filling 2 plates. I carried the food to Marco and Nicolina. "Do you need anything else?" "Ma always kisses my cheek when she serves me dinner." He wiggled his brows. "I'm not your mom. But what the hell?" I puckered up and smooched his forehead. "Keep your hands off my woman," Enzo said. "No hands were involved. Besides, she kissed me." Marco stuffed a piece of bread into his mouth. "Because you asked," Enzo deadpanned. I turned to go back to the table and caught Nico staring. In Sicily, she'd either glared or smirked every time she met my gaze. I would have preferred either. Her current expression reminded me of the veterinarian who'd put my dog to sleep. Sad, but resigned. "Thank you, Shanna." She turned her attention to her food. "You're welcome." Too hungry to let her bug me, I sat beside Enzo and dug in. He waited until I stopped to take a drink of wine before asking, "How is it?" "It's incredible. Melts in my mouth." But nothing compares to your omelets. I might or might not have mentioned breakfast food to remind Nico he'd woken up with me. Petty, I know, but her sympathetic look had unnerved me more than I'd thought. Marco said, "She's a keeper, Enzo. A real woman knows how to eat." I agree. Exactly how long he intended to keep me remained to be seen, but I would love every second of it until he let me go. After dinner, Enzo and I stood side by side in the kitchen, washing dishes and drinking wine. I couldn't stop thinking about Nico showing up on the doorstep like an abandoned baby. Marco said she was hiding from her family, but he'd dodged the question when I asked why. Enzo leaned close and nudged my shoulder. "What's on your mind?" I was talking to Nico earlier. She acted like she didn't know anything about the gunshots or the fires. He tossed the dishcloth on the counter and turned toward me. "Her father denies any involvement." "Do you believe him?" "I didn't at first, but the more the situation develops, the more I have my doubts." "If not the Lazios, then who?" The idea that another person or group of people wanted to hurt me made the food in my stomach threaten to make a repeat performance. "Do you have any enemies? What about work? Could someone you investigated want revenge?" "Enemies? No. The people I investigate don't know who I am. Some find out the name of the agency and harass Alex, but I'm not listed on a website or anything." The Amazon I'd caught with Mayor Carter flashed through my mind. There was a woman at the engagement party who recognized me after I'd taken pictures of her with the mayor. "Carter is a dangerous man." "I know." "Do you know her name? Or is that confidential?" That he'd considered client privilege impressed me. Legally, private investigators aren't required to protect client confidentiality, but most who don't aren't in business long. Regardless, I don't know anything about her other than she's tall, brunette, and sleeps with married men. "Did your former boss ever return your call?" "No. And that's another oddity in a growing list of Alex's strange behaviors." "Perhaps you should try again." My stomach twisted. Actually, you might be onto something. I didn't think about it before because I was blindsided by the whole getting fired over voicemail thing. But he left 3 messages the day of the wedding. "What did he say?" I pulled my phone out and opened the first message. "Listen." Enzo's frown deepened. He hit play on the next voicemail and shook his head. When he finished the third, he clenched his jaw. "They don't contradict each other, but they are odd. Call him." "It's late. I'll reach out to him tomorrow." Frowning, I nodded and looked away. He captured my chin between his thumb and index finger and tilted my face toward his. "I will make whoever destroyed your apartment pay, but you're safe here with me." "We can't stay here forever. Your parents know about us. I can't imagine they approve." He pressed his brow to mine. "Believe it or not, I am capable of making my own decisions." I had my doubts any of the Marchionni boys strayed far from their parents' wishes. But I didn't want to argue. Instead, I went for a safer subject. "I'm going to need to do some shopping. Everything I own in this world fits into a suitcase and a carry-on." "Starting over from the ground up will require more than a trip to Target." I winced. "I know, but it will take me years to replace everything." "I'll replace your things." "Thanks, but no thanks. You've done too much for me already." "I don't like handouts." I pulled away and put the dinner plates away. "It's not a handout. I care about you. It's what friends do." I'd really started to hate that word. It's too much. Friends don't buy each other furniture. Stop getting hung up on the money. Would you buy Maggie groceries if she was hungry? Yes, but no buts. He squared his shoulders as if preparing for a fight. The cost of her food might be what, $5? 10% of your weekly income? Something like that? Enzo shrugged. The cost of your furniture, clothing, and other items is roughly the same for me. My mouth fell open. How can I argue with that? There's nothing wrong with accepting help. Fine, but I insist you save every receipt. I'm going to pay you back. He grinned and pulled me against his chest. There are other ways to settle debts. Let's go upstairs. Did you just call me a prostitute? I jammed my finger into his ribs. He jumped back like I'd zapped him with a live wire. Hey, none of that. None of what? I wiggled my fingers. Are you ticklish? Lorenzo Marchionni, did I find your weakness? You are my weakness. Enzo ducked low, set his shoulder in my belly, and tossed me over his shoulder.
Chapter 26. Enzo. Few things brought out my caveman instinct like a squirming woman hanging over my shoulder. I smacked Shauna's sweet little ass and strode to the stairs. Even fewer things could take my mind off my last conversation with my mother, but somehow Shanna had done both. She yelped, laughed, and renewed her effort to wiggle free. Put me down! Not a chance. I opened the bedroom door, stepped inside, and kicked it shut. Wait, back up so I can lock it. She laughed. I took a step backward and waited until I heard a click. All set? Yeah. She reached down and squeezed my butt. This position does come with a nice view. Better than me standing over you on the deck? I tossed her onto my bed. She tapped her lips. I don't think anything could beat that. Challenge accepted. I motioned to the full-length mirror beside the closet. Undress and stand over there. Shauna rolled over and crawled across the bed. My brain stuttered. She stood, turned her back to me, and glanced over her shoulder. I folded my arms and pretended her flirty little smile hadn't hardened my cock. Taking her sweet time, she slid her shirt over her head. I love that you go braless. I followed her lead and removed my t-shirt. Shauna bent at the waist and slid her shorts down her tan legs. How about when I go full commando? Love that, too. Without turning from her, I fumbled to open the nightstand drawer. I'm on the pill, and you're the only person I've slept with since my last doctor visit 5 months ago. She moved behind me, reached around and popped the buttons on my jeans. I froze. It had been over a year since I'd slept with anyone, but I'd never gone bare. I'm squeaky clean, if you're sure. She dipped her hand beneath my boxer briefs and showed me exactly how sure she was. I sucked in a breath and watched her hand moving over me. Babe, that feels incredible, but you have to stop. She pressed her breasts against my back. Why? I've never been inside someone without a condom, and I don't intend to come in your hand now that you've offered. I turned and guided her to the mirror. Shauna stared at my reflection as I kicked off my shoes and the rest of my clothes. Don't look away. Moving behind her, I kissed a line down her spine and eased her upper body forward. I won't. Her breath hitched. Gripping her hips, I buried myself inside her in one quick thrust. She gasped and stepped forward, but I wrapped my arm around her middle to keep her where I wanted her. As a general rule, sex felt good. However, feeling her body without anything between us went so far beyond good, it didn't register in the same universe. Holding her gaze in the mirror, I leaned forward and nipped her earlobe. How's the view? Do you like watching me fuck you? She nodded. Tell me. I slapped her perfect ass. Enzo. Shauna sagged forward, but I urged her upright until her back pressed against my chest. Tell me, Shauna. Tell me what you want. I cupped her mound and circled my middle finger over her sweet spot until she trembled in my arms. More. Yes, keep doing that. I slowed our rhythm and held my hands still. Doing what, babe? Letting out the sexiest whimper I'd ever heard, she covered my hand with hers in an effort to get me moving. I grinned at her reflection. Please, Enzo. Please what? I'm so close. Please, harder. I need it harder. She rocked her hips. I obliged. Shanna tensed and closed her eyes. Look at me. Meeting my gaze once again, she drew a breath and pressed her head back against my shoulder. It was too much. The added sensations, the sound she made, her writhing in my arms. The pressure built inside me until I couldn't hold back. Staring at her gorgeous reflection, I had no choice but to give in to the pleasure. Shanna moaned my name and followed me over the edge. I scooped her into my arms, laid her on the bed and stretched out beside her. Heart pounding, throat tight, I drew her back into my arms and whispered, I adore you. She pulled away just enough to study my face. It doesn't count if you say it after sex. Grumbling, I reached for my cell on the nightstand. What are you doing? Setting an alarm so I can tell you how much you mean to me again in an hour, and every hour after that until it counts. Her smile lit the room. I like the sound of that. Caressing her cheek, I whispered, and I like making you smile. In fact, I love making you smile so much, I plan to keep doing it for a long time. Everything is so complicated. How? No buts. No hows, no worries. Not tonight. Let's pretend there is nothing standing in our way for the next few hours. I wanted to promise her everything would work out, that we'd overcome the odds, that we'd get our happily ever after, but I couldn't. Not yet. A few hours locked away from our crazy lives sounds like heaven. Shauna's phone rang. Don't answer it. I held her tighter. I have to. It could be Mrs. Dixon calling about my cat. She gave me a quick peck and scrambled to retrieve her phone from her shorts. Hello? I didn't need to hear the other end of the conversation to know she'd received bad news. It showed in every shaky breath she took. She paled, and her hand flew to her mouth. Where is he? Is this about the cat? I sat upright, praying I'd misread the situation. Shauna stared at me for a heartbeat before turning away. Please, tell him I'm on my way. Did someone find Mr. Bouguer? That name. Only Shauna would saddle a poor feline with a moniker like that. It's Jack. He's hurt. She rushed around in search of her clothing. A bolt of jealousy pierced my armor. I'd come as close as I ever had to telling a woman I loved her. 5 minutes later, she's leaving me to go see another man? What happened? There was a break-in at his shop. He was attacked. She swayed and grabbed the edge of the dresser. That was his father. Jack is out of the hospital, but he's in bad shape. You're an asshole, Marchionni. A real asshole. Give me 5 minutes to have a car and security ready to go. I shoved my legs into my jeans and moved to her side. You're coming with me? That she wouldn't want me there hurt, but I'd follow her lead. If that's all right with you. Thank you. I don't know what I'm walking into. I'd rather not go alone. I'd spent enough time with her to know better than to embrace her when she was hurt or upset. Instead, I rested my hand on her arm. I'd hug you, but you'd fall apart. She fell into my arms. 10 minutes later, we were en route to the French Quarter. I held Shauna in the back seat while one bodyguard drove and the other rode shotgun. She hadn't said much since we'd left the house, but she hadn't stopped touching me. I'd take what I could get. The car came to a stop in front of the antique shop I'd found her in earlier that day. Plywood covered one of the plate glass windows, and bits of glass littered the sidewalk. Shauna and I were out of the car and halfway to the private entrance on the side of the building before the guard had time to unfasten his seatbelt. I called over my shoulder. Stay here. I'll call you if you're needed. He didn't look happy, but I didn't give a shit. Shauna stabbed the buzzer 6 times before I slid my hand into hers. Yes, a disembodied male voice crackled over the intercom. It's Shauna. By the time the door clicked open, I'd lost feeling in my fingers. She led me through a small courtyard, up a set of exterior stairs, and to another door. Without bothering to knock, she turned the knob and walked inside. Hello? I'd expected the place to resemble the shop below with too many pieces of heavy, dark furniture crammed inside. However, we were greeted with concrete floors, metal and glass banister, and minimalist black leather furniture. Jackson Landry's home had an industrial chic vibe. An older man with graying hair and an impressive, if not scraggly beard came into the room and hugged Shauna. He's not thrilled that I called you. Tough shit. She dropped her purse on the entryway table and headed for the stairs. Is he in his room? Yep. The guy extended his hand to me. Monty Landry. I gave him a quick but firm handshake. Lorenzo Marchionni. Monty's bushy eyebrows rose enough for me to see the color of his eyes. I thought I recognized you. I eat at your place a couple times a month. While I enjoyed meeting my patrons, I hated it when they gave me the expectant stare as if waiting for me to recognize them. Glad you enjoy it. He motioned to the room on the left. Might as well have a seat. Knowing those two, she'll be up there a while. I seated myself on the couch. She said he's like a brother to her. How bad are his injuries? A brother, huh? Monty snorted.
Chapter 27. Shanna. Standing outside Jack's bedroom door, I replayed our last conversation over and over like a looping gif. Jack cupping my face. Jack telling me he loved me. Jack looking so damned hurt when I didn't say it back. "I can hear you out there. You may as well come in," Jack called from inside. Laughing through my fear, I peeked inside. My heart lurched. Had he not spoken, I wouldn't have recognized him through the swelling and bruises. "Hi." He turned and limped into the bathroom. "I told Monty not to call you." "Pull up your big girl panties and deal." Following him, I said, "I would never have forgiven either of you if he hadn't. Are you okay?" "You should have seen the other guy." He peeled back the bandage covering his nose and leaned closer to the mirror. "Uh-huh." "Relax. It looks worse than it is." "It looks pretty bad." "I didn't want you to see me like this." Jack drew a deep, rattling breath and faced me. "But I'm glad you came. I need to talk to you." "If this is about what you said before, I meant what I said. But you made your feelings for me, or lack thereof, clear." He tossed the bloody gauze and tape into the trash before shambling back into the bedroom. I reached out to help, but I didn't know where to touch him without hurting him more. "What did the doctor say?" "Broken nose, cracked ribs, and a shitload of soft tissue damage. Nothing major. I guess I was lucky." "Lucky?" The need to hunt down the people who'd attacked him and run them over with a bus became unbearable. "What did they take?" "Nothing." He sat on the edge of the bed. "That's what I need to talk to you about. They were looking for something specific." I stiffened my spine and braced for impact. "Go on." "Your video camera." My hand flew to my throat as if it had a mind of its own. "My camera? Why?" "It's pretty obvious, Miss Private Investigator." He gave me a lopsided grin that broke my already bruised heart. "There's something on it they want." "Mayor Carter." My mind reeled with the implications. All this time, I'd assumed the mob had burned down my apartment. I was filming him and his latest bimbo the night of the engagement party. That would explain the henchmen. I wondered how many cheating spouses could afford to hire pros to do their dirty work. His frown deepened. "You realize Carter is as dirty as Bourbon Street on Fat Tuesday, right?" Snap! Another piece fell into place. Only this piece scared the crap out of me. Taking pics of him cheating on his wife was one thing. Catching him on camera in the middle of a shady deal was another. I bet Carter's people threatened Alex. He left 3 messages the night he fired me. The first was asking for the footage. The second told me to destroy it. He canned me in the last one. Jack sighed. "Have you spoken to him since you've been back?" "No, he hasn't answered my calls." This was my fault. I stopped wearing a rut in the floor and turned to him. I could have prevented this if I hadn't been too much of a coward to call him sooner. "That's bullshit, darling, and you know it." He held his hand out to me. "You had no way of knowing they'd connect you to me." I wrapped my fingers around his, and he pulled me closer until I sat beside him. "How did they?" "My guess is They saw me when I went to your apartment, but the fire department wouldn't let me in. I may have caused a scene. Did you notice anyone watching the place? Not in the daylight, but there were a few folks hanging around when I went back after dark and snuck in. You what? A mental image of him dressed in black from ski mask to boot settled front and center in my brain. Despite the seriousness of the situation, or maybe because of it, I giggled. Shoshana, this isn't funny. It's not like I was rummaging through your underwear drawer. I thought the cat might be hiding in the building. He tried for serious, but laughed, winced, and laughed again. In that brief moment of levity, I knew our friendship could survive anything. I flopped back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I don't think Mr. Bouguer survived the fire. Miracles happen. Jack laid beside me. I need you to focus for a few minutes, okay? This is important. I'm sorry. I'm listening now, but it felt really good to laugh. What was on the recording? The mayor going into a hotel room with a brunette Amazon woman, coming out an hour or so later, and sucking her face in the corner of the lobby. So much had happened since that night, it seemed like months had passed. The proverbial light bulb came on over my head. Holy shit! I remember now. They exchanged documents and possibly cash? Jack sucked air through his teeth. Where's the camera? I dipped my chin and glanced away. Remember the watch you said clashed with my cocktail dress? You're telling me the fucking watch is the camera? It was in my shop all along. I'm sorry, Jack, I didn't know. I thought I was working a typical cheating spouse case. A high-profile cheating spouse case? He shook his head. You didn't suspect anything when your apartment went up in flames? How about when Alex left 3 text messages and fired you? We'd known each other for years, but I'd never seen him so angry. I was in another country at a wedding reception when he called. I wasn't exactly thinking straight. And the apartment was a coincidence? Nope, I thought it was the mob. I pressed my lips together and sat upright. He had every right to be frustrated and pissed off, and looking for someone to blame. I'd take responsibility for whatever part I'd played, but not when he'd gone into full asshole mode. Any idea who the brunette is? He stood and loomed over me. No, but she was at Maggie and Gabe's party. A wave of nausea rolled over me. Could the Marchionnis be involved in this? Could Enzo? I should let you get some rest. He grabbed my wrist surprisingly hard for someone whose knuckles resembled hamburger. You remembered something else. No. I pulled my arm back, but he held tighter. You're hurting me. Shauna, these people trashed my place looking for your camera. I walked in while they were pouring gas on my antiques. Jack let go of my wrist. If you know something or suspect it, I've damn well earned the right to know. I know, and I'm really sorry you got mixed up in this mess. But I don't know any more than you do at this point. Holding my arm to my chest, I scrambled away from him. Shauna, everything okay in here? Enzo stood in the doorway, surveying the situation. Yep, just a little misunderstanding. I forced a smile. Jack glanced between me and Enzo and smirked. At least I thought he smirked. His ruined face made it difficult to tell. Remember what I said, Shoshana. I'll be here when you need someone to help you pick up the pieces. Jack, don't. Words failed me. I needed to get out of there before one, or both of us, said something we couldn't take back. He waved his hand as if dismissing me. Do me a favor before you go back to the mansion. Get your bag from the shop. It's behind the counter where you left it. Sure. I hope you feel better soon. I all but ran from the room. Enzo lingered for several heartbeats before he followed me downstairs. What the hell was that about? I'll tell you in the car. I snatched my purse from the floor and turned to Monty. I need something from inside the shop. He lifted a brow, glanced in the direction of Jack's room, and then to me. "You know the code to the back door." "Thanks." I turned on my heel and marched outside with Enzo following. Call it bad luck or screwy karma, but he grabbed the same wrist Jack had all but crushed upstairs. I cried out before I could stop myself. He released me. "Did he hurt you?" "No." Not ready to discuss it, I hurried to the rear entrance of the shop. "Where are the bodyguards?" "Out front." He folded his arms. "Why?" "Text them. They need to keep their eyes open and have the car ready to go." I met his gaze and immediately wished I hadn't. While Jack had a raw and loud brand of anger, Enzo was the master of cold, detached, and deadly. "I'm going to ask you one more time. What is going on?" I lowered my voice. "Whoever did this is looking for my camera." He nodded toward the shop. "It's inside?" "In my old beat-up backpack behind the jewelry case." Enzo pushed past me. "Stay here." "Don't be ridiculous. I know the layout like the back of my hand." I ducked in front of him. Gasoline fumes assaulted me the second I opened the door. I lifted my hand to turn on the light, but thought the better of it. With my luck, I'd blow myself and the antique store to smithereens. Enzo covered his nose and mouth. "Leave it. It's not safe in here." Feeling more than a little hysterical, I ran through every possible horrific outcome of venturing farther into the shop. "Do cell phones cause static?" He looked at me as if I'd spoken in Swahili. "I don't know." "I need light. There are no phone signs around gas pumps." I shook my head. "Never mind." Glass crunched beneath my feet as I eased behind the display counter. Thankfully, I didn't have to go far. The bag was exactly where I'd left it. "Got it." "Let's go." He waited for me to pass him before following me back into the courtyard. I knelt and emptied the contents on the cobblestone. "What the hell, Shanna?" Enzo glanced toward the gate and back to me. I pulled the spy watch from the side pocket and slid it onto my sore wrist. "Okay, I'm ready." Enzo tensed his jaw hard enough to crack his molars, looped his arm with mine, and all but dragged me to the car. I slid into the back seat. "I need to make one more stop." "No." His tone might have worked with his staff, but I wasn't on his payroll. "I need to talk to Alex. He could be in danger." It occurred to me I was probably too late, but I had to see him, to make sure he was okay, to find out what he knew. "I'll take you first thing in the morning. Right now, we're going back to the house, reviewing that video, and you're going to tell me everything, starting with exactly what Jack Landry means to you." I couldn't handle one more thing. Not one more solitary thing. Least of all Enzo's jealousy. I tapped the driver's shoulder. "Stop the car." "Keep going." Enzo ran his hands through his hair. "Shanna, I'm begging you." I said, "Stop the car." Jiggling the handle, I gave them my best imitation of a woman ready to leap from a moving vehicle. The door locks clicked. I tried the handle, for real this time. He'd locked me in. Worst still, Enzo hadn't said a word. The driver stared in the rearview mirror for a heartbeat before turning his attention back to the road. "This is kidnapping." Glaring at Enzo, I pulled my ringing phone from my pocket. He rested his head back, closed his eyes, and drew a deep breath. "Who is it?" "Maggie. Am I allowed to answer?" Enzo motioned for me to continue. I understood his concerns, and yes, I trusted his judgment on most things. However, I hated being treated like a child, even if I was acting like one. "Hello?" Maggie sighed. "Shanna, thank God. I've been worried sick. How are you?" We'd told each other everything since we were kids. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed her until I heard her voice. Choking out a sob, I said, "Awful, Mags. Just awful. Everything is falling apart here." "Gabe told me what's going on. We don't want to see Enzo married to Nicolina any more than you do. A shot of adrenaline heated my face for a half-second before I broke out in a cold sweat. What? I didn't hear the last part. Her voice rose. Gabe is furious. Papa Joe announced Enzo and Nicolina's wedding date, Evelyn and Pietro Lazio. She went on about problems and working it out and knowing how I felt about Enzo, but I tuned her out. Are you okay? Has something happened? Enzo reached for my hand, but I jerked back. Forcing myself to look at him, I said, Congratulations. Will Nico wear white?
Chapter 28. Enzo. My world tilted on its axis. I'd had every intention of telling Shanna about the situation with the Lazios, but the timing always seemed off. That's bullshit. I had more than ample opportunity to come clean. I'd avoided it. I have no idea what color Nico will wear because I have no intention of marrying her. Knowing anger and defensiveness would get me nowhere, I forced myself to speak in a softer tone. Gabe is determined to break ties with the other families. As you can imagine, they aren't happy to lose a business partner. There's pushback. The Lazios made a power grab by demanding I marry Nicolina. Shanna stared out the window. She could ignore me all she wanted, but I knew she'd heard me. I had less than 10 minutes to plead my case before we reached the house. You saw Nico when she arrived. Does she look like a woman who wants to be married? Her shoulders tensed, telling me she was in fact processing what I'd said. My father supports the marriage. He ordered me to make it happen before I left Comiso. But the real problem is my mother. She's... And you didn't think this was something I should know? Her voice cracked. Aren't you the one who said secrets hurt people? Guess what? I'm freaking devastated. I never meant for you to find out like this. I planned to tell you, but I didn't want to hurt you unnecessarily. Gabe swore he wouldn't auction me off like a prize stallion. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. My mother is scheming to undermine Gabe's efforts to end our associations. A wedding would... Shanna whipped her head in my direction. Evelyn wants to stay in the... She glanced at the driver. To stay involved? Does Gabe know? I'm not sure. The fact it hadn't dawned on me to reach out to my brother concerned me. Had I subconsciously bought myself time to consider my mother's offer? What does that say about me? About my feelings for Shanna? You haven't called him? She stared. I turned from her and folded my arms. I'd no sooner ended the call with my mother before Nico showed up. By the time that situation was settled, we had to run to the quarter to check on your friend. No way. You're not blaming your lying by omission on anyone else. You've known about this for days. Plus, you had time enough to cook dinner and take me to bed between the time Nico arrived and Monty calling about Jack. I scrubbed my hands through my hair. You're right. I should have told you, but... Stop while you're ahead. No buts, no excuses. She narrowed her eyes, and I knew I was in trouble. From everything I've heard, Gabe is serious about getting out. What exactly does she think will change when you marry Nico? There is no when. I have no intention of marrying Nico. I don't know what she saw in my expression, but she held up her hands and shook her head. Evelyn's planning to put you in charge, isn't she? Shanna laughed a bitter laugh that pissed me off. Rather than answering her, I went on the defensive. My mother doesn't call the shots. She gave me a look that said she believed otherwise. I'm right, though, aren't I? Damn it, why can't I lie to this woman? Yes. Shanna pressed her lips together and nodded slowly. And you're considering it. That she could read me so easily shook me to my core. Compared to most couples, we hadn't spent that much time together, but what we'd lacked in quantity, we'd more than made up for in quality. Rather than sugarcoating or lying, I laid the truth out for her. If I were in charge, I would have the authority to let Gabe and the others walk away without bloodshed. Not to mention, I could take care of the people in Comiso. However, this conversation is a moot point. Neither Gabe nor my father will allow me to step up. Furrowing her brow, Shanna licked her lips and closed her eyes. When she opened them, her expression hardened. Are you keeping anything else from me? No. I wanted to hold her hand, to reassure her, to tell her I loved her and wouldn't allow anything to get in our way, but it felt as if she'd erected a wall of ice between us. Is there a computer I can use at the mansion? The abrupt change in subject confused me. Sure, she had other things on her mind than my family, but I would have bet my right hand she had more questions. Yes, several. If you're planning to review the video footage, the one in my father's office has the largest monitor. The driver stopped long enough to punch the code into the security pad. Shauna sat up straighter and gripped the door handle. We should continue our conversation. No need. She bolted from the car and from me. Following her inside, I struggled to make sense of her change in demeanor. The woman had a temper, and she could run hot and cold, but her reaction seemed off. Why is there no need? Unless you're still keeping secrets, there's nothing else to say. It all makes sense to me now. Shauna strode through the hall, glancing into different rooms. Where the hell is the office? I walked past her and opened the door to the office. I'm glad my situation makes sense to you. Perhaps you could explain it to me? Your mother is using you to protect her other children. She plopped down on my father's chair and held out her hand. The watch? The truth in what she had said knocked the wind out of me, but that couldn't be all of it. My mother had to believe in me to think I could handle the business. Too bad Shauna didn't have the same faith in my abilities. I dropped the gadget in her palm. You're wrong. It wouldn't be the first time. She unscrewed what looked like the knob to set the time and plugged a USB cable into the hole. My curiosity over the spy watch won out over my anger, or maybe the technology gave me an excuse to change the painful subject. I moved behind the desk and leaned in to get a better look at the gadget. I'd never know it had a hidden camera. It looks like a cheap, old man watch. Focusing on the computer, Shauna nodded. That's the point. A window popped up with a list of files. This should be the last one I shot. Shauna clicked on a video with the same date as the engagement party and maximized the viewing window. A rather crisp recording of Mayor Carter and a brunette appeared on the screen. You were in the elevator with them? How did you take this without them noticing? Despite the fact someone had set fire to her apartment and beaten the shit out of Jack, it hadn't occurred to me that her job was dangerous. Had the mayor or his acquaintance noticed the camera? Could they have harmed her? I wear it on my left wrist, the same hand I use to hold my cell and pretend to read emails or send texts. No one looks twice about a 20-something with their nose in a phone. I'm impressed. You're going to make a hell of a private investigator. Thanks, but I'm not sure I'll ever get my license. Before I could dig deeper, she turned her attention back to the computer. Shauna paused the video and zoomed in on the brunette. Does she look familiar? She was at the engagement party. No, but I was in the kitchen the majority of the night. Marco knocked on the office door. I thought I heard you two come in. Where did you go? Shauna glanced up and flashed him a smile. I have a new lead on the arsonist. Come take a look. If I had any doubt she was upset with me, it vanished when she interacted with Marco. Shauna went from stoic to sunshine bright in the blink of an eye, yet she claimed we had nothing more to discuss. Mind if I come in? Nico stood in the entrance barefaced and wearing a borrowed t-shirt and shorts. Without her war paint and tailored-to-be sexy clothes, she looked more like the girl I'd grown up with and less like a spoiled mafia princess. Sure. Once again, Shauna smiled. It wasn't until she glanced at me that her frown returned. Marco nodded at the brunette on the computer monitor. Who was that, and why does she look familiar? She was at Gabe and Maggie's party. I was hoping one of you would recognize her. She zoomed in tighter, eliminating Mayor Carter from view. Smart woman. I moved aside to allow Nico room to step around me. That's Sofia Abruzzo. Nico looked between us. I was surprised to see her at the party. I wasn't aware the Marchionnis and Abruzzos were on friendly terms. We aren't, Marco and I said in unison. Shauna sat back, met my gaze and motioned in Nico's direction. The slight lift of her brow turned the gesture into a question. Not seeing any harm in including Nico in the conversation, I nodded. Shauna turned to the other woman. Do you know what business Sofia Abruzzo would have with the mayor of New Orleans? Nico shook her head. No, why? She drew a deep breath and typed something into the computer. Another media player window popped up. We watched the screen as footage played of Ms. Abruzzo and Mayor Carter exchanging envelopes. A payoff, if ever I'd seen one. Marco made a sour face. That dude is twice her age. Leave it to Marco to focus on the alleged sex between our enemy and the mayor. I pinched the bridge of my nose. That dude runs this city and has his fingers in the pie of any organized crime that happens in the parish. Shauna's shoulders slumped. Whatever she's doing here, it isn't good. Nico turned to me. Maybe now you'll believe I didn't have anything to do with sabotaging your soup or vandalizing your restaurant? Marco cursed under his breath. Thanks for your help. Shauna closed the windows and unplugged the watch. I'm sure you three have a lot to discuss. It's late. I'm going to bed. You should stay. This involves you too. I reached for her, but she sidestepped me. Call Gabe or your mother or the Pope. I don't care. All I want is for this to end. She walked out and closed the door behind her. Bro, I don't know what you did or what you said, but I'm not sure I'd want to sleep next to her tonight. Marco moved his middle and index fingers like a pair of scissors. Wincing on behalf of my balls, I turned to follow Shauna. I should go after her. Enzo, don't. Nico stepped in front of me. She doesn't strike me as the type of woman who enjoys being cornered. No one likes being cornered. I moved around her. Did you finally tell her about the engagement? Balling my hands at my sides, I mentally counted to 10. Maggie told her. Marco made a strangled sound. No wonder Shauna was shooting daggers at you. She's rightfully upset and needs some time alone. You'd be wise to give it to her. Nico seated herself in a leather wingback chair facing the desk. Besides, we have things to discuss. Marco motioned to the computer. Like why Sofia Bruzzo was cozying up to the mayor. Last I checked, Pops pays him a small fortune to keep the local cops off our backs.
Chapter 29. Shauna. Before I'd applied for the job as Alex's assistant, I'd spent hours watching YouTube videos on how to ace a job interview. The majority of them included appropriate answers to the question, what is your greatest strength? Until a week ago, I would have replied, my ability to land on my feet. Then again, until a week ago, gravity had dictated the difference between up and down. Enzo had changed my personal laws of physics. He'd given me my highest highs and lowest lows. Often in such rapid succession, I felt as if I lived on a carnival ride. I called Alex from the house phone on the off chance he'd answer if he didn't recognize my number. Hello? Hearing his voice lifted a boulder of worry from my shoulders. Regardless of whatever else happened, he was alive. Alex, it's me, Shauna. Don't hang up. Why are you calling me? He whisper-shouted into the phone. It's not safe. I know, and I'm sorry. When I couldn't reach you, I assumed the worst. I'm fine, selling the house and the business. Where are you? He sounded desperate, and desperate men did desperate things. Until the BS with the Abruzzos and the mayor happened, I would have trusted him with my life. Now, I hesitated to tell him my location. Still in Sicily. I won't call again. Wait. He muttered something I couldn't understand, likely speaking to his wife. Mail the video to the mayor's home address and forget you ever saw it. Stay the hell out of New Orleans. For good, if you can manage it. You know what's on the video recording. Why else would you leave your entire life? Let it go, Shauna. Walk away and don't look back. He disconnected the call. I'd idolized the man for years. In my mind, he was a cross between Chuck Norris and MacGyver. The type of guy who could sweet-talk, fight, or finagle his way out of any situation. I'd never heard him so scared. It unnerved me. In desperate need of grounding, I called my best friend and perhaps the only person on the planet who could understand the situation. Hi, Shauna. Maggie tried for chipper, but her sleep-slurred voice told me I'd woken her. I'm sorry. I don't even know what time it is here, let alone there. It's 8 in the morning. I should be getting up soon anyway. I'm glad you called me back. How are you? I've been better. I drew a breath and gathered my scattered thoughts. I need some advice about the situation with Enzo. One sec. A rustling sound came over the line, followed by a squeaking door. I'm walking into another room, but I'm here. He says he doesn't want to marry Nico. You don't believe him? I shook my head, realized she couldn't see me, and said, I believe he doesn't want Nico. But it's not that simple, is it? She hesitated. No, it's not. There's something you should know. I lowered my voice in case anyone came down the hall, but then it occurred to me the line could be tapped. Paranoid much? Before I get into it, how certain are you no one can listen into our call? Maggie sighed. Honestly, I've never asked, but I'm sure Gabe would have said something if there was a concern. I chose my words carefully just in case. Evelyn is working with Nico's father to undermine Gabe's project. Are you sure? Her voice thinned. Enzo told me she wants him to step in for Papa Joe. Once he has control, he can let the others go free. I hated that his own mother would use him. She's willing to sacrifice Enzo's happiness so the rest of them can get what they want. That bitch! Please tell me Enzo isn't considering it. I didn't know how to answer her. Shoshana, promise me he isn't considering it. It's still funny to me that you sound like a mom. I am a mom. And if I were really pissed at you, I would have called you Shoshana Ruth. Now, stop stalling and answer my question. I resisted the urge to point out she hadn't asked a question. I'm not entirely sure. He told me once he wanted to take over for Papa Joe, but his father wouldn't have it. Gabe's told me the same thing. I know Enzo is worried about the people the Marchionnis support in Comiso, and he doesn't want to see his brothers get caught in a war. Gabe plans to keep up with their charities here, she sighed. But Enzo's right to worry. Things are super tense. Are you safe? The thought of her and the kids stuck in Sicily with so many dangerous people made my chest hurt. We are safe. I promise I'll get out of here if that changes. She sounded so tired. I hated to bring up the next topic. Enzo's going to call Gabe. But you should know, something is going down here with the mayor and the Abruzzos. She gasped loud enough I heard it. How do you know that? In addition to some tonsil hockey, I inadvertently recorded a payoff between Sophia Abruzzo and Mayor Carter. Memories of my burned-down apartment and Jack's ruined face danced unwelcome through my head. I'm 99% sure Carter or the Abruzzos burned down my apartment. Oh my God, Shauna. There's more. Jack Landry walked in on a couple of paid muscle in his shop. They'd torn it apart looking for the video footage and were in the process of torching the place. Is he? He's pretty banged up, but no serious damage. I paused to catch my breath. Why did they think he had the camera? He thinks they spotted him going through my apartment and followed him. You're still staying with Enzo, right? Her voice rose. Yes. Besides the fact I'm homeless, I'm freaked the hell out. You should be. She went quiet. Gabe is negotiating with the other 4 families. 2 are on the fence and seem to be waiting to see what happens. The Lazios want money and the wedding, but the Abruzzos are hardcore. What does that mean? I had a feeling I knew, but I needed to hear her say it. They don't believe in letting people walk away. They want blood. I raised a trembling hand to my chest. Would a Marchionni-Lazio union prevent violence? She didn't reply. Holding my breath, I whispered, Mags, tell me the truth. Would things go easier for Gabe if Enzo married Nicolina? It would be the show of strength that could sway the other 2 families to our side. But Gabe won't force him to marry Nico against his will, nor will he sign off on Enzo getting stuck in this bullshit for life. What little hope I had dimmed like a candle starved of oxygen. What if it's not against his will? What if he wants the position and respect and everything that goes along with it more than he wants me? What if him marrying Nico saves the lives of the people I care about? She softened her tone. You love him? Yeah, I do. Admitting my feelings for him cost me a piece of my soul, because I knew they weren't enough. Have you told him? Once, but it didn't count. Maggie laughed. It slipped out after a mind-blowing orgasm. How did you know? I grinned at the memory and wiped the tears from my eyes. He didn't say it back. He played dead until I let him off the hook. I'm sorry, Shanna. He's a good man, but he keeps to himself. I'd give him time to come around. Don't be sorry. This was all leading up to the part where I ask your advice. Okay, now I'm totally confused. You weren't asking me if you should dump Enzo before he dumps you? That she knew me so well made the conversation so much harder. Yes and no. I'm going to need more to go on than that. I drew every ounce of courage I had left in me and prayed I could lie convincingly enough to pull off what needed to be done. Jack told me he was in love with me. What? She spoke loud enough to wake mainland Italy. Jackson Landry? Your strictly platonic friend, big brother figure never crossed a line, Jack? That's the one, and he laid a hell of a kiss on me. I'm stunned. She went quiet again. Tell me about this kiss. It rocked my world, Maggie. I forced myself to laugh. Butterflies with bullet wings, tingles in all the right places. I was as stunned as you are. He told me there were men in this world who would never hurt me like he meant it. But you just told me you were in love with Enzo. I think I love them both. Not a complete lie. With Jack, it's so easy. No family drama, no arranged marriages, no passion. Didn't I just tell her about the freaking kiss? There's passion. Is there? Really? Damn it. I needed her to back me up, not question me. No offense, but I don't think I can handle the Marchionni family long term. They're a lot to deal with. And Evelyn. I understand they're a handful. But why do I get the feeling you're choosing Jack over Enzo has more to do with the circumstances than how you really feel about them? Because it does. I can see myself happy with Jack, but I can't with Enzo. He's allergic to commitment, moody, and comes with more baggage than a cruise ship. You know I like Jack. He's a good catch. But I'm worried about you. I'm worried about me, too. I know it's weird, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about him after that kiss. I'll support you no matter what, Maggie groaned. Actually, no, I won't. I have to say something, and I hope I'm right. Because if I'm not, you're going to be angry. Heck, you'll probably be angry anyway. Just spit it out. I braced myself for an argument. I know you, Shoshana Ruth Isaac. You're feeding me a bunch of bull right now, and I'm not sure why. Are you trying to convince yourself you'll be happy with Jack? Or are you lying to me so I'll play my part in this scheme of yours? My mouth hung open. In Sicily, she and Dahlia told me I couldn't lie for shit. But I'd thought I could pull it off over the phone. So you'll play your part. Lead with that next time. She laughed. I about peed my pants when you said Jack kissed you. He did kiss me. It wasn't half bad, but my heart wasn't in it. Because Enzo owns it. Something like that, I grumbled. But I need to end things with him. I can't be the reason he makes the wrong decision. Isn't that his choice to make? Yes, but it's my choice to remove myself as a variable in the equation. She sighed. I'll support you no matter what. But I don't agree with you on this one. Thanks for having my back. I fake yawned. Don't make any rash decisions. Sleep on it. Good idea. I'm going to crash. Have a good night. Day. Have a good day. I tossed the phone to the side, curled up, and buried my face in the pillow. The damned thing smelled like Enzo. I pulled it closer, closed my eyes, and prayed for sleep. 10 minutes, and a good cry later, I called Jack. Despite what Maggie thought, this wasn't a rash decision. I'd made up my mind and would deal with the fallout. Shanna, everything okay? Surprisingly, he seemed wide awake. Rather than sugarcoating the situation, I decided to go with the brutal truth. I have a huge favor to ask. A huge, potentially very awkward favor. Lay it on me, baby. Not surprisingly, he seemed high on pain meds. I need to make Enzo believe we're involved. Jack laughed longer than necessary. Forget it. Hold your horses. He seemed to struggle to regain his composure. What's going on? It's complicated. I got that when you asked me to be your fake boyfriend. His voice thickened. I saw the way you reacted to him in the shop. Did he hurt you? I swear to God, I'll kill the son of a... No, it's nothing like that. I regretted not taking the time to think through this conversation before I called. I love him, and I think he might feel the same. But it isn't going to work between us. I need to do something that will convince him I'm not the woman for him. Jack sucked in a breath. You're sure about this? No. Absolutely. What's the plan? Shanna? Enzo knocked on my door. I called Gabe, but he wanted you on the line. Shit. Give me a minute. I'm on the phone. I scrambled for the bathroom for a bit more privacy. Is that him? Jack sounded entirely too happy. Panicking, I tried to imagine what I'd say to my boyfriend while my lover stood in the hall. Yes, I know, Jack, but it's hard. I haven't been completely honest with him. Ah, it is him. Repeat after me. I love you, Jackson Landry. I've always loved you. I don't know what I was thinking when I told you I needed to take a break and fuck a Marchionni. Not helping, I whispered. Say it. I spoke loud enough to be heard from the hall, but not too loud that it'd seem staged. I didn't mean to hurt you. Like I said before, I needed a few months to play the field. You know, to make sure. But I'm ready to marry you now. Whoa there, Nellie. I have an entire grand proposal planned for us, and you're spoiling it. Okay, that'd be great. I can't wait to see you. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. Thanks for being so understanding, Jack. I love you too. The door opened behind me. I turned and found Enzo staring. I'd expected anger, maybe some shouting, but nothing could have prepared me for his lost little boy expression. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I did make a rash decision.
Chapter 30. Enzo. Nothing that happened since the engagement party made sense, except Shanna. I hadn't realized how much I'd come to depend on her being in my corner until I'd overheard her conversation with Jack. In those few precious seconds, she gutted me. Gabe wants everyone present before we get into the details of the situation with the Abruzzos. The fact I could form a word, let alone complete sentences, surprised me. Now, it's 2:30 in the morning. She avoided my gaze. He's on Italy time. It dawned on me I should be angry with her. She'd lied to me about her relationship with Jack, strung me along and made me believe in something besides family and work and obligations. One look at her swollen eyes and red nose, and I couldn't find it in me to raise my voice. For whatever reason, she'd been crying, and that hurt almost as much as her deceit. Shauna went into the bathroom and splashed water on her face. Forget it. I'll tell him you're asleep. We'll schedule a call first thing in the morning. I turned to go. No, it's okay. I'll talk to him now. She gave me a curious look, likely wondering how much of her conversation I'd overheard. You should know he's not happy that I told you about the family business. Then he should be upset with Maggie, too. I talked to her before I called. I figured as much. She frowned. I finally got a hold of Alex. You've been busy. I clasped my hands behind my back so she wouldn't notice them trembling. He uprooted his family and left New Orleans. Says he's selling his house and business. She spoke without looking me in the eye. He told me to send the video to the mayor's home address and run away. Instead, you're making plans to marry a man who owns a business in the French Quarter. She pressed her lips together and looked away. Mayor Carter is desperate to get his hands on that recording. and to eliminate any witnesses. Shauna shook her head. Maybe, maybe not. Alex still has the same cell phone. The mayor has half the police force in his back pocket. They could find him if they wanted to. Plus, you can't sell a business or real estate without some sort of physical address. It's entirely possible Alex and your fiancé are still breathing because Carter's goons believed them when they said they hadn't seen the video. Maybe. But would you leave loose strings dangling if you were him? It's not easy to get away with murder. It ups the ante with law enforcement. Enough people die, and the state or feds get involved. Are you speaking from personal experience? She tilted her head and grinned. My chest tightened. How can she crack jokes as if nothing was wrong? You're in more danger now that you've seen the video. You're welcome to stay here until you can make other arrangements. Shauna flinched as if I'd jammed a needle into her arm. Thanks. I'll stay out of your way. Use the bodyguards when you go out. I will. She motioned toward the stairs. We should get down there. I couldn't face Marco and Nico, nor could I speak to Gabe until I had a minute to myself. Go ahead. I'll be right down. Shauna opened her mouth to say something, but I ducked into my room and closed the door. This changes everything. Without hope of a future with Shauna, I had nothing to lose by agreeing to marry Nico. I could finally have everything I wanted. Respect, control, power. I could give my brothers their freedom and ensure the safety and quality of life of the people in Comiso. Hell, I'd probably move to Sicily and be treated like a fucking rock star. It seemed like a dream come true, but there was one huge problem. And it wasn't being chained to Nico for the rest of my life. I didn't want it. I don't want that life. I want the white picket fence with Shauna. Fuck Jackson Landry. I'm not giving up without a fight. Taking the stairs 2 at a time, I devised a battle strategy to win the girl. I'm not thrilled that Enzo shared as much as he did about the family business, but what's done is done. Gabe's disembodied voice filled the office as I walked in. That's rather hypocritical of you. I shut the door, strode across the room, and seated myself in my father's desk chair without making eye contact with anyone. I told Maggie the truth about us the night I proposed. My brother spoke in a calm, even voice, but I detected a hint of defensiveness. Perfect. He's going to play right into my hand. You shared our secrets with her because you loved her and planned to spend the rest of your life with her. Funny, I did much the same. Shauna stared, but I pretended not to notice. Marco and Nico exchanged glances. He grinned, she frowned. Gabe said, Right. Now will one of you tell me what's going on? We spent the next few minutes catching him up to speed on what we knew about the Abruzzos, Mayor Carter and Shauna's video footage. I knew the Abruzzos were going to be a problem, but I didn't see this coming. Gabe paused, likely still processing the information. My guess is they want to take our place in New Orleans. Can they do that? Marco turned to me, but I assumed the question was meant for our brother. Gabe said, Enzo, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Since when does he care what I think? With the mayor in their pocket, the local authorities will turn a blind eye. I'm more concerned with the fact our homes and businesses are here. I can't imagine the Abruzzos will want us to remain in the city. Nico nodded. I agree. They aren't known to share. Do you honestly believe they will run you out of town? Shauna glanced between us. Once they have a solid foothold, yeah, I do. Gabe's voice hardened. Like it or not, this is Pop's bad karma coming back to bite us in the ass. Marco rested his elbows on his thighs and clasped his hands. Before we get too far down the sins of the father road, how can we stop this? Nico drew a deep breath. If Enzo and I get married, the other families will support the union. The Abruzzos are strong, but they can't stand against everyone. Shauna hung her head. She's right. It's the quickest way to avoid splitting the families in the 2 camps and having an all-out war. Since when does she know our politics? I replayed our previous conversations, but couldn't recall mentioning the possibility of a rift and what that would mean. She's been talking to Maggie. My goal is for us to go legit, not force people into a marriage they don't want, Gabe said. Meeting my gaze, Shauna verbally tied me to the tracks of an oncoming bullet train. Your mother has been working with Pietro Lazio. She plans to put Enzo in your place as head of the family once he and Nico are married. Marco cursed under his breath, and Nico nodded. I sat there frozen, unable to make sense of why Shanna had told him. Sure, I'd planned on coming clean with him, but in my own time. Gabe's voice rose. Enzo? I'd planned to tell you during this call. Seems Shanna beat me to the punch. Rather than glancing up and risk seeing their disappointed expressions, I stared at the phone. Ma thought if I took over, I could cut the rest of you loose without any bloodshed. Gabe cleared his throat. Is this what you want? Does it matter? I'd had enough double talk and manipulation to last me a lifetime. I'd answer him, but I wanted to hear him say he'd never hand me the keys to the kingdom one more time. Now isn't the time for another change in leadership, so why ask the question as if my opinion matters? If you'll let me finish, Gabe exhaled a deep breath. I'm willing to work with you for now and step aside once things are settled. He'd knocked me for 6. So much so, I didn't know how to respond. I've been thinking about what you said to me before the wedding. You were right. I've been so busy working to get us out, I didn't stop to think about the ramifications. He lowered his voice. Had I listened to you sooner, we may have avoided some of this drama. Thanks. I couldn't remember Gabe ever admitting he'd made a mistake. Perhaps Maggie's influence had done him some good. So, what will it be? Do you want this or not? I had zero doubt of my answer, but I hesitated. Shanna had handed me to Nico on a silver fucking platter. Not only that, she seemed resigned. Too resigned. What's her angle? Is she trying to ease her guilty conscience, or playing the martyr? Nico filled the silence. Before you answer that, know that my father will side with the Abruzzos if there is no wedding. I figured as much, but that doesn't change my mind about sentencing the two of you to a life of unhappiness, Gabe said. Enzo, do you want to take over? No. Shanna turned her head in my direction fast enough to have a whiplash. You said you did. At one point, I thought so, but I've changed my mind. What the fuck is she up to? Since the drive home? She smirked and leaned closer to the speakerphone. Gabe, give him some time to think it over. It's been a rough night. I don't need time. I know what I want. I nodded to Nico. You don't want to be married to me, do you? No. She glanced at Marco and sighed. But I'm willing to go through with it to prevent anyone I care about from getting hurt. She's right. Think about what this could mean for your family and the people in Call Me So. Shauna's voice rose in volume and pitch. And there it is. She's pushing me away. But why? I said no. If you're holding out because of me, don't. I'm with Jack. I plan to marry him as soon as I can leave the house long enough to get a marriage license. Seeming to realize everyone in the room was staring at her with varying degrees of shock, Shanna folded her arms and turned her head. Gabe said, Why don't the two of you work this out and call me back? No. Staring at Shanna, I leaned closer to the phone. I don't want it. She closed her eyes and shook her head. Great. Now that's settled. How do we bring the Abruzzos and Mayor Carter down? A rustling noise filled the line, followed by Gabe's muffled voice. I'm going to need to wrap this up soon. The doctor is here to examine Pops. How is he? Marco asked. The same as before. He has good days and bad days. I thought back to the video of Mayor Carter and Sophia Abruzzo exchanging envelopes. Is Pops well enough to answer a few questions? Gabe said, If not now, he will be later. Why? You're aware he's made many sizable contributions to Carter's election campaign? I glanced at Marco. My younger brother perked up. And even larger donations to Carter's offshore accounts. Gabe laughed, the first real laugh I'd heard from him since the wedding reception. The mayor can't take us down without drowning with us. We'll need proof. I could all but feel Shauna's confusion or frustration or guilt. I didn't know for certain, but it seemed she'd realized the error of her ways. Marco rubbed his hands together. Give me a few hours at Marchionni Corp, and I'll have your proof. Nico sighed. What if the mayor hands the information over to the Abruzzos? What's to stop them from handing it over to the police? The Marchionnis could be implicated too. Or if Carter's already in too deep with the Abruzzos, he may not be able to break ties. Shanna met my gaze. He'll find a way. I sat back with my hands behind my head. If there's one thing career politicians like Carter care about, it's their reputations. You're absolutely correct, Gabe said. Marco turned to me. Now that we found a way to take care of Carter, what do we do about the Abruzzos? Gabe cleared his throat. I wasn't going to tell you two until I had more definitive information, but the informant who came forward about Joe's murder claims the Abruzzo family ordered the hit. The news hit me like a bullet to the chest. This was what he was keeping from us? We had a right to know. You're right, you did, but nothing has been proven. He exhaled a long, slow breath. One way or the other, we'll make them pay. But it may take longer than we'd like. No more secrets. We know what you know. I told Shanna that secrets got people hurt, and I'd meant it. I'd spent the previous few days focused on the wrong people. Had I known about the hit on my brother, we might have solved the mystery sooner. You got it. Gabe lowered his voice. Enzo, I'm going to need to confront Ma. I can't allow what she's done to stand. While I agreed, I hated the idea of him laying into her. She had a lot on her plate dealing with my father's illness. And again, she hadn't seemed that upset when she said Pops wouldn't be around long enough to challenge my position. Do what you need to do. After we'd said our goodbyes and ended the call, Nico and Marco all but ran from the room. Shanna stood as if to follow. Remaining seated with the desk between us, I asked, Why'd you do it? Her back to me, she hung her head. He needed to know about your mother. And I planned on telling Gabe, but that's not what I'm referring to. I thought things were over with Jack, but when I saw him injured, I'd had enough of her charade. Why don't you climb down from that cross you nailed yourself to and tell me the fucking truth?
Chapter 31. Shanna. The anger I'd expected to see in Enzo upstairs finally made an appearance. Unfortunately for me, I deserved it. I'd royally screwed up. But how was I supposed to know he'd refuse the offer to take over for Gabe? Frustrated, and more than a little ashamed, I decided to play dumb. I don't get your reference. What do you mean, my cross? Enzo stood and walked around the desk. I'm accusing you of pretending to be in love with another man to force my hand. Guilty as charged. I didn't want to force your hand. I wanted you to make your decision based on what was best for you. You admit it, then. He stopped inches in front of me, but kept his arms at his sides. You're only pretending to be in love with Landry? I took a step back. Why didn't you agree to take Gabe's position? He would have given it to you with or without you marrying Nico. I don't want it. He pushed into my personal space again. Don't you get it? None of this means anything to me without you. But my brain skipped like a broken record. No buts. He cupped my cheek. I've never said these words to a woman, besides my mother and Hildy. Oh my God, he's freaking serious. Staring into my eyes, Enzo whispered, I love you. My entire body turned to warm goo. He loves me. A split second later, the reality of the situation barreled into me with the force of a cannonball. He loves me. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. I'm no expert on the matter, but this is the part where you either break my heart or say it back. I'm sorry. He lowered his hand and turned away. Resting my hand on his arm, I waited until he met my gaze. I'm sorry I lied to you about Jack. I thought I was making things easier for you. By ripping my heart out through my balls? The mental image made me grin. When you put it like that, I see your point. But Enzo, this will never work between us. His forehead wrinkled and smoothed and wrinkled again, as if he struggled to hold back his emotions. Your family will never accept me. I'm poor and short and Jewish. Not that I give a damn what anyone thinks, but my brothers love you, and so does Hildy. He cupped my cheek again. Rubbing his thumb over my lips, he whispered, "And so do I." "I love you too." He tugged me to his chest and kissed me like he meant it. Wrapped in his arms, his lips on mine, I didn't know if I should laugh or cry, so I did both. Enzo pulled back enough to whisper, "Let's get some sleep." Let me get this straight. You tell me you love me, kiss me like it's your job, and now you want to get me in bed so we can sleep? I can think of a few hundred other things I'd like to do to you first. He scooped me up into his arms. Before I could reply, my phone rang. Enzo frowned. "It's past 3. Ignore it." "No one calls at this time of night unless it's important." "You're right." He set me on my feet, but remained close enough to listen in. Praying it wasn't Jack, I glanced at the screen. "It's a local number, but I don't recognize it." Enzo motioned for me to move things along. "Hello?" A female voice, far too perky for the middle of the night, boomed through the connection. "Hi! Sorry to call so late. I called the number on the flyer, and the nice lady who answered said to call you. I found your cat." "You found Mr. Bouguer?" This night couldn't get any better. I did a happy dance that would have made Charlie Brown proud. "Where was he? When can I come get him?" "I found him nosing around the dumpster at work. Poor thing is covered in soot and half-starved." Her voice lost some of its pep. "I'm in the quarter. Are you nearby?" "The Garden District. I can be there in 10 to 15 minutes." Frowning, Enzo whispered, "Don't give her the address." The woman said, I'd take the St. Charles streetcar home. We could meet at the Washington Ave stop long enough for me to hand him over." Warning flares shot off in the back of my mind. I didn't want to wait outside, in the dark. Besides, I was pretty sure they didn't allow pets on board. "Can you send me his picture? Just to be sure it's him?" "Okay, but I'm in a huge hurry. The streetcar only runs once every hour this time of night. I'm taking it now. Don't hang up." I bit the inside of my cheek and waited for my phone to ding. Enzo pulled the phone from my hand and disconnected the call. "What the hell? Why did you do that?" "I don't like this. She was trying to keep you on the line. They could be tracing the call." He handed it back to me. I rolled my eyes. "That's a myth. The police can trace a call as soon as it connects." "But you're right. Something about this seems fishy." The alert sounded. I opened the photo and gasped. Mr. Bouguer and his orange and white fluffy goodness stared back at me. "It's him, but she said he was dirty." Enzo jerked the phone from my hand and zoomed in on the photo. The woman called back before I got to the bottom of his bizarre reaction. I snatched the cell from him. "Don't answer it." He scowled. I recognized the woman holding the cat. "How? She didn't show her face." I wanted to scream. I needed to answer the phone and get my cat back, but Enzo freaked me out. "The tattoos." He sighed. "Play along with her. Try to convince her it's better if you meet her tomorrow." I slid my finger across the phone to answer the call. "Hi, sorry about that. I was getting dressed to meet you and accidentally hung up." "Did you get the pic?" She sounded skeptical. "Yes, thank you. That's definitely him." I drew a breath. "I'd rather come to you. That way I can give you the reward." He narrowed his eyes and shook his head. "I don't want the reward." She laughed a little too high and too loud. "I'll be happy when he's back in your arms." Enzo mouthed, "Tomorrow." It killed me to say the words. "Does tomorrow work better for you?" "What am I supposed to do with your cat until then?" The woman was definitely losing her patience. "Hang on a second. Let me see if I can get a ride home so you can come here tonight. Don't hang up." "Okay." My heart beat so fast I feared it'd escape and run off to save Mr. Bouguer without me. Frowning, Enzo whispered, "I have access to her home address. Have her take him home with her." The woman came back on the line. "I'm sorry.
I can't get a ride. Either you meet me at the streetcar stop, or I'm putting him back in the dumpster.
My sleep and cat-deprived mind went into hyperdrive. I'll order a rideshare for you here, and another to get you home. She hesitated for so long I thought she'd hang up. Are you there? I reached for Enzo to remain upright. I need your name for the driver.
I'm here,
she sighed.
My name is Tara Cole. I'm at the Daiquiri Shack on Bourbon.
I met Enzo's disapproving gaze. Great. I'm ordering the car now. I'll meet you at 1405 Delaronde Street in Algiers Point. Enzo shot into action before I finished giving her Maggie and Gabe's address.
I thought you said you were in the Garden District.
She sounded irritated again. I am. I was hanging out with some friends, but I was on my way out. My apartment burned down, so I'm house-sitting for a friend until I find another apartment.
Great. See you there. Thanks for the rideshare.
See you there. I disconnected and went to find Enzo. In here, he called to me from the man cave. 3 armed bodyguards glanced at me when I walked into the room. Enzo said, "Good thinking sending her to the empty house. Do you have a key?" Yes, and thanks. I was afraid she'd call it off and hurt my cat. I pressed my hand to my stomach to stave off a wave of nausea. If anything went wrong, mine and Mr. Bougaire's lives were on the line. Enzo motioned between the security team. One of you need to pose as a rideshare driver. One shadows Shanna, and the other 2 stay out of sight near the house. No, she'll know they're security. I have a better idea. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed Jack. Miss me already? His sleep-graveled voice told me I'd waken him. Hey, does your dad still have that light-up rideshare sign? Sure does. Why? How'd you like to get a shot at catching the guys who kicked your ass? Enzo shook his head and stared at the ceiling. Bad idea. I'd love it. Jack sounded more awake by the second. Good. Call your poker buddies at the station and have them on standby near Maggie's place. Make sure they stay out of sight. Enzo narrowed his eyes. We need to question Tara. We can't do that if she's in jail. I ignored him and filled Jack in on the situation. 5 minutes later, Enzo and I walked outside. He put the keys to his car in my hand and folded my fingers over them. I don't like you going alone. I should come with you. You have to stay here. Tara will take one look at you and run. I rose to tiptoe and kissed his neck. Besides, I'm hardly going alone. There will be one of your men following me and 2 more in or near the house. Plus, Jack will have his cop friends close enough to make an arrest if the same men who hurt him show up. Shanna, you don't need to get up close and personal with someone to be shot. He had a point, but it was too late to chicken out now. Enzo pulled me into an embrace. Be careful. I will, I promise. He's acting like he's never going to see me again. I realized I was taking a risk, but I'd done scarier things without backup. His concern made me more nervous than the thought of meeting up with the bad guys. I slipped into the driver's seat of his swanky Sportster and started the car. Enzo stood in the drive until the gate closed behind me. My phone rang, scaring the crap out of me. I checked the screen and hit answer. Hi, Jack. We have a problem. Already? I swallowed my nerves and forced myself to keep driving. What's wrong? I've been waiting for her for 5 minutes. She's not here. Shit. While not surprising, Tara had alternative transportation. I'd hoped Enzo's guys would arrive before she did. Take the sign off the dash and head over there. You still need to ID the men who broke into your shop. Will do, but there's no reason for you to be at Maggie's when things go down. I'll bring Mr. Bougaire to you when it's done. I'm already on the road. I hit the gas and flew down Chapatoulas Street. By the way, Enzo didn't buy the lie. The fake engagement is off. I didn't think he would. Does this mean I get my ring back? He laughed and disconnected the call.
Chapter 32. Enzo. I was completely in love with Shanna, but that didn't mean I was whipped enough to blindly follow her lead. I'd spent too many years doing what my parents told me to do. I was done taking orders. As soon as the gate closed behind her, I fired up Dante's motorcycle and hit the road. I hadn't been on a two-wheeled death trap since I graduated college. I had to hand it to my little brother. He had great taste. The bike was sleek, swift, and sexy as hell. I blew past Shanna on Chapatula Street and crossed the Mississippi River Bridge in a blur. After parking a block from Gabe and Maggie's place, I slipped between two houses and made my way to the gate on the back of Maggie and Gabe's property. A single light shone from the first floor, but the second story was dark. A car door slammed out front, but I had no way of knowing if Shanna or Tara had arrived. I eased to the window and peered inside. A man, large enough to run defensive tackle for the Saints, sat on the kitchen floor playing Chase the Laser Pointer light with an orange and white cat. I ducked low, pulled my phone out, and texted Shanna and the head of my security team. "Abruzzos are in the house. Do not enter." A few seconds later, my guy replied, 10-4. I held my breath, waiting for her to reply. When she didn't, I fired off another message. "I see the cat. Go back home." Nearby, two females were engaged in a heated discussion. I couldn't make out their words, nor did I recognize their voices. It has to be Shanna and Tara. Who else can it be this time of night? A split second later, someone turned on the lamp in the front room. I risked another look inside and swore under my breath. Shanna and Tara stood inside the living room arguing. I have to get in there. However, I suspected the bad guys weren't kind enough to leave the back doors unlocked. I needed to get around front, fast. Thankfully, I'd spent enough time at backyard barbecues to know the location of the motion-activated floodlights on the side of the house. Unfortunately, the other people in the yard had never enjoyed Gabe's famous grilled chicken. Lights spilled over the area, illuminating me and two rather stunned intruders. The guy closest to me drew his weapon before I remembered I'd come armed. I dove for cover, but lifted my head when the unmistakable sound of a taser filled the night air. The guy with the gun flopped on the ground like a fish, if said fish were hooked up to 50,000 volts of electricity. Before I could sort out which, if either of the men were on my side, a woman screamed inside the house. Raising my hands, I called out, "Are you here with Jack?" "I'm NOLA PD. Go. I'll be right in." The man with the taser knelt over his victim with a pair of handcuffs. Between the floodlights and the commotion, I'd lost the element of surprise. Instead, I went for shock and awe by attempting to shatter the glass door with a flagstone paver. The impact left spiderweb-shaped cracks, but the glass otherwise remained intact. The door slid open, and I'm man enough to admit I nearly shit myself. Jack smirked. "Marchionni, nice of you to join the party." I'm also man enough to admit I debated slamming the flagstone into his smug face. I peered past him and blew out a sigh of relief. The guy in the kitchen was tased, cuffed, and laying in a puddle of piss. Tara was also cuffed, but other than what promised to be a hell of a black eye, she appeared unharmed. Shanna glanced up from nuzzling the now infamous Mr. Bouguer and smiled. In that moment, my entire world righted itself. Sure, we had a shit ton of problems to handle, but we'd found the cat. That has to count for something, right? "Mr. Marchionni," the head of my security team approached me. "What do you want us to do with the female?" Tara's eyes widened, as if she hadn't recognized me until he said my name. "Take her back to the house." I handed him the motorcycle key. "I left a black Ducati on the next block. Can you have someone ride it home?" "Sure thing." Judging by his expression, he'd be the one taking the bike out for a spin. "What about the others?" The officer who'd saved my ass in the backyard said, "They're under arrest for the assault on Jackson Landry." Shanna moved to my side. Why do I have the feeling this was too easy? Because your PI instincts are spot on. This isn't over. These two were the hired muscle, and not very good ones. I draped my arm around her shoulders. The damned fluffball pulled a feline ninja move that left the top of my hand bloody. "Bad kitty." Shanna might have tried to scold the cat, but her laughter ruined the effect. If anything, the beast took her good mood as permission to plot my demise. Shanna lowered her voice. "Taking Tara to the house is kidnapping. Only if she presses charges. Is it wrong I like the way you think?" She moved closer but stopped when Mr. Bouguer hissed and gave me the evil eye. "After everything you've been through, not at all." I reached for her arm but thought the better of it when the cat growled. "We should go before more cops show up. I'll drive. You keep that thing away from me. Shauna nuzzled the top of the cat's head. Who's a good kitty? Who's going to get treats and sleep on Mommy's pillow tonight? Like hell. Sirens blare in the distance as I hurried her to my BMW. Shauna cast one last look at the house before sliding into the passenger seat. Gabe's going to have a fit when he sees the broken glass. Not if I have it fixed before I tell him. Walking to the driver's side, I nodded to my team as they stuffed Tara into the back of an SUV. I sank into the leather seats, started the engine, and pulled away. Are you absolutely sure we should take her back to your parents' house? Shauna chewed her lower lip. She's worked for me for years. I need to know who she's working for now and for how long. I had no idea what I'd do with her if she refused to talk. My father would have no such qualms. He'd ordered people executed for far less, but I couldn't do it. Shauna rested her hand on my thigh. Are you okay? You seem far away. I realized I made the right decision when I turned down Gabe's offer. How so? Keeping my eyes trained straight ahead, I said, because I don't have it in me to kill her. Shauna tensed to the point the cat let out several loud meows. That's a good thing, right? Yes, a very good thing. I couldn't help but think back to my father criticizing me for being too soft. At the time it hurt, but now I took it as a compliment. I didn't want to be the kind of man people feared. I'd earn their respect the right way. What happened back there? I thought you were going to wait at the mansion. She gave me side-eye, but her constant smile belied her effort to look stern. Sweetheart, I love you, but I'm through following orders. I squeezed her hand. Even in bed? As long as we take turns, I'll gladly follow your lead in the sack. Laughing, I downshifted and hit the gas. To answer your other question, I spotted one of the mayor's men in the house playing with the cat, but before I could do anything, the second guy pulled a gun on me. Oh my God! Shauna's hand flew to her mouth. It pains me to admit it, but one of Jack's poker buddies saved my ass. Any chance one of them is in the mayor's pocket? She stilled as if considering the possibility and shook her head. There's always a chance, but I highly doubt it. Jack's known most of them since high school. Good. I turned my head and rolled my eyes. Jack's never going to let me live that down, is he? Probably not. She frowned. Especially since I dropped Tara with a right hook and used her limp body as a human shield while another of Jack's poker buddies tasered the man in the kitchen. So much for my man card. I shook my head. You're 5 foot of nothing. How in the hell did you manage to hold her up? She's nearly 6 feet tall. I run a lot, spend hours in the gym, and I'm working on my blue belt in Krav Maga. Color me impressed, somewhat frightened, and slightly turned on. Israeli Defense Force training. Remind me to never piss you off. We beat the security team back to the house, which gave Shauna time to settle the cat in an upstairs bedroom while I filled a shallow plastic basin with sand from Maggie's son, Ryan's sandbox. Marco met me in the hall. Where the hell have you been? What's with the dirt? It's a litter box. You found Mr. Bouguer? His eyes lit up. Where is it? I love cats. Of course you do. I lowered my voice. Before you get distracted by yet another pussy, I need you to focus. We took down 2 of Carter's guys and brought back... You what? The color drained from his face. I'll explain on the way. Follow me. I turned and headed for Shauna's room. One of my employees was either working for the mayor or the Abruzzos. I intend to find out which and what exactly she was doing for them. Marco swallowed hard. And then what? Then I either have her arrested or scare her into hiding. He sighed. Thank Christ. I didn't need to read minds to know he'd assume the worst. Pops was right. I'm soft. Marco clamped a hand on my shoulder. No, bro. You're a decent human being. Where is the turncoat? Security is bringing her here any minute. Apart from family dinners and the holidays, I'd never bothered to spend much time with Marco after I'd left home. I'd certainly never gone out of my way to hang out with him. Now that I'd gotten to know him as a person, I regretted my decision to avoid my brothers. As long as we're still breathing, it's never too late to make amends. He took the makeshift litter box from me. Go downstairs and meet them. I'll help Shauna with her pussy. Cat. I shook my head. Thanks. I met the head of security in the hall outside the laundry room. I wished I could say my knowing exactly where he'd taken her was a coincidence, but I couldn't. In Sicily, my father used the basement on the rare occasions he brought an enemy to our home. Here, he used the laundry. Want me to stay? The large man folded his arms. No. I stiffened my spine. Keep an eye on the exterior cameras, in case there's any blowback. He nodded and marched away. One day, very soon, Shanna and I will live a life without the need of bodyguards, security cameras, and guns. I pushed the door open. Tara sat in a metal chair with her wrist cuffed to a metal ring in the wall. She took one look at me and burst into tears. Careful to stay out of kicking range, I crouched to her eye level. I'm not going to hurt you, but I need some answers. They'll kill me, she said between sobs. I won't let that happen. You don't get it, Enzo. Not even your family can protect me. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. I stood and took a step toward the door. Very well. If you don't talk to me, maybe the big guy can get some answers out of you. You said you wouldn't hurt me. I worked to keep my expression neutral, but inside I cringed. If I didn't calm her down, she'd wake Hildy, and I had zero desire to explain the situation to the woman who'd raised me. That was when I thought you'd cooperate. Tara hung her head. I'm dead either way. Not if you tell me what I need to know. I hitched a shoulder. It's your choice. Start talking and I'll set you up in a new life. Test my patience, and I'll drop you off at Sofia Abruzzo's with a note pinned to your shirt telling her you spilled every one of her dirty secrets. She mumbled. You'd help me start over? After everything I've done? Yes. I folded my arms. Now start talking. Sofia, she threatened my kids if I didn't do what she asked. So much for honor among thieves. I recalled Tara showing me photos of two young children. The oldest couldn't have been more than 4. Where are they now? Shanna stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. Tara's eyes widened. With their father, but Sofia knows where he lives. If she thinks I've turned on her, she'll kill them all. Give me the address. I'll have one of my men take them someplace safe until you can join them. Tara glanced between us. There is nowhere safe. I have access to a fishing cabin down in Terrebonne Parish. It's not much, but you'd be safe there temporarily. Shanna knelt beside Tara. Her proximity was too close for my liking, but I'd learned she could take care of herself. I guess that could work. She relayed her ex-husband's address and slumped in the chair. Let me make some calls. Shanna walked to the door. Taking her arm, I leaned close enough to whisper. Tell Marco what's going on and ask him to get some men over there ASAP. She nodded and stepped out. How long have you been working for the Abruzzos? Tara winced. Almost 2 years. Her answer stunned me. I'd suspected her association had started when Gabe had stepped up, but 2 years. My oldest brother and his wife had been murdered around the same time. What exactly did you do for them? Keeping her gaze low, she said, At first, I called them when any of your family were in the restaurant. Like Joe and Rebecca, for instance. Fresh tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry. I didn't know what they had planned, or I never would have told them. I turned my back to her so she couldn't see my expression. Joe and Rebecca had their last meal in my restaurant. Joe had winked and elbowed my side when he joked about taking his wife on a date. After they murdered my brother and his wife, what did they ask you to do?
Chapter 33. Shanna. I stood in the hall, eavesdropping and trying to work up the courage to open the door. Enzo needed my strength, but Maggie's family had all but adopted me when I moved to New Orleans. Rebecca was like a big sister to me. I reminded myself I had a job to do, a job that didn't include allowing my personal feelings to turn me into a coward. Some private investigator I'm turning out to be.
I reported your schedule, told them when your father came in and who he met with. The same for your mother.
Tara could barely speak through her sobbing.
Recently, they had me keeping tabs on Gabe. I didn't tell them when he brought Maggie Guthrie in on a date.
The mention of my best friend made my blood boil. I walked into the room and glared. Thanks for that, at least.
Maggie was raising Joe's kids. I couldn't risk them losing their aunt, too.
Tara stared as if she thought I was the good cop to Enzo's bad cop routine. Boy, did she have that wrong. Too bad you didn't think about the kids before you told the Abruzzos where to find their parents. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. She might not have cut the brake lines, but she'd played a part in ending their lives. Enzo turned to face Tara. You weren't flirting with me the night of the engagement party. You were scared. She looked away. You jumped at the chance to take Hazel to the hospital because you needed to get out of there. His voice rose. Tara shrank lower in the chair.
I planned to tell you what was going on at the hospital. I thought I'd be safe there.
Safe? He laughed a humorless laugh that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. You poisoned the soup. I reached for the dryer to remain standing. The kids, Maggie, Gabe, Enzo, me. We all could have died. Tara dipped her chin.
I didn't.
No? You expect me to believe that? He clenched and unclenched his hands as if struggling not to strike her.
I was supposed to, but I couldn't do it. There were kids at the party.
She wiped her face.
I had a bottle of nail polish remover in my bag. I used it instead. It stank so bad I didn't think anyone would eat it.
The incident with the crowd at the wedding had unnerved me. But this terrified me. So many innocent people could have been hurt, or worse. Do you know what kind of poison they gave you?
No, but Abruzzo's men warned me not to inhale the soup after I poured it in.
How big was the container? I wasn't an expert on poison, not by a long shot, but I'd researched common types for a case. Some substances worked through ingestion, others by inhalation, and a few worked both ways. Tara shrugged.
The size of a lipstick tube.
Precious few poisons were strong enough that such a small amount would contaminate a commercial-sized stock pot full of minestrone. I rested my hand on Enzo's shoulder. If I had to guess, I'd say botulinum toxins. They occur naturally in improperly prepared foods. It would have looked like an accident. How so? You hear about cases of mass food poisoning on the news from time to time. It would be unusual, but not impossible, for a large crowd of people to become very ill or even die from eating the same meal. He gave me a curt nod and stared at Tara. Where is this poison now?
It's buried in my backyard. I hid it in a tampon holder in my purse to get it out of the restaurant.
She raised her chin as if proud of herself. Enzo, this is serious. We need to find the poison and go to the police. If it was botulinum, even seemingly small amounts could be fatal. We're talking about attempted murder of over 200 people. 250, plus any of the staff who happened to breathe it in. He turned for the door. No police. We don't know which ones we can trust.
Where are you going?
Tara tugged on the handcuff securing her wrist to the wall.
You can't leave me here. What about my kids?
I need some air. You'd do well to keep your voice down. If you wake the housekeeper, I'll kill you with my bare hands. His ice-cold expression sent a chill down my spine. I stepped aside to make room for him to leave. When he closed the door, I turned to Tara. I don't particularly like you, but I understand you were caught in a bad situation. She nodded.
I didn't know they were planning to hurt Joe and Rebecca. When I found out, I tried to stop them from hurting anyone else.
You should have gone to Enzo. I don't know what I would have done in her situation, but I couldn't let her off the hook. We needed her help, and I planned to get it by any means necessary. Are you willing to tell the authorities what you told us? The color drained from her face. I pointed in the direction Enzo had gone. That man has promised to set you up in a new life far from here. You've worked for him for years. Do you believe he'd go back on his word?
No, but...
Her voice cracked. I leaned close enough to feel her breath on my face. If you don't do something to stop them from murdering other innocent people, you'll be just as guilty as they are. Can you live with that kind of blood on your hands?
I'll do it. I swear. Just please, make sure my kids are okay."
She broke down. "You have my word." I handed her a clean towel. "Stay quiet while I talk to Enzo." Tara nodded and slowed the waterworks. Exhausted from lack of sleep and an abundance of drama, I shuffled into the kitchen in hopes of finding a full coffee pot. Instead, I found Hildy. The housekeeper glanced from me to the hall. Tell me he isn't planning to hurt anyone. He's not. I rested my hip against the counter. We're keeping her here for her own safety. Enzo sent a couple of bodyguards to pick up her kids, and then we're sending them into hiding. Hildy sighed, as if the weight of the world had lifted from her shoulders. Thank God. I heard crying and thought. She waved her hand. It doesn't matter what I thought. It amazed me she didn't ask questions. Had I woken to a woman cuffed to the wall of my laundry room, I would have freaked out. Then again, Hildy had spent decades with the Marchionnis. Working in this house for so many years must have been hard. At times, yes. She busied herself preparing a pot of coffee. Enzo and the others are in Joe's office. He said to tell you to join them when you're ready. Are you okay? I rested my hand on her arm. I wanted to hug her, but I didn't know if it would help or make things worse. Tilting her head, Hildy met my gaze. I'll be fine. And you? How are you holding up? I had a feeling she wasn't asking about my lack of sleep or the situation with Tara. I love him. None of this changes that. A smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. And he told me he loves me too. Saying the words aloud woke the butterflies in my stomach. I never thought I'd see the day. She threw her arms around me. He's a lucky man. Thanks, but I'm the lucky one. Pulling away, I said, I should get in there. I'll start some breakfast. It'll be ready when you're finished with the call. Despite the hour and the drama, Hildy hummed while she worked. I made my way to Papa Joe's office and opened the door enough to poke my head inside. Enzo held his arm out to me while continuing his conversation on speakerphone. Gabe, I understand your concerns, but this isn't your decision to make. My heart sped to a gallop. Decision? Are we back to arguing who's in charge? Gabe said, It's not yours either. This affects all of us. I moved to Enzo's side, and he pulled me into his lap. Marco muttered under his breath, and Nico whispered something into his ear. When she glanced away, he stared at her as if she were the freaking Mona Lisa. Before I could sort out what had happened between the two of them, another male voice came over the line. An older, gravelly voice. Papa Joe? Marco, are you still there? Yeah, Pops, I'm here. I'm sending you my password and the instructions. I want it done. A series of deep, wet coughs filled the line, and then it went quiet. Someone had likely hit the mute button. You're too sick to go to prison, Pops. Marco turned to Enzo and widened his eyes. Agreed, Gabe said. We have the illegal campaign contributions. We don't need to expose the bribes to hang Carter. The man is as crooked as a... Papa Joe's voice rose. Gabriel, pull your head out of your ass and listen to me. I'm a dying man. I won't be around long enough for the authorities to extradite me. Holy crap. They're talking about throwing Papa Joe under the bus to bring down the mayor? You don't know that. The color drained from Marco's face. The U.S. and Italy have a fairly lenient policy. You don't have to be convicted. They can start the extradition process once they bring charges against you. Unless he's awaiting trial in Italy. The words fell out of my mouth before I thought the better of it. I'd managed to piece together enough of the conversation to get the gist, but nowhere near enough to add anything to it. Not to mention, I doubted the elder Marchionnis would appreciate my input. Papa Joe cleared his throat. "Shanna, I presume?" Enzo opened his mouth to speak, but I beat him to it. "Yes, sir." The line went quiet again. Only this time I doubted anyone hit the mute button. "She's right," Papa Joe said. "I'll have my driver take me to visit Sal down at the docks. I don't like the way he looks at your mother." "Pops, Sal is almost 100 years old," Enzo chuckled. "Save the violence until we know if and when the charges are filed." Gabe said, "Before we get ahead of ourselves, know that this will ruin our reputations. People have suspected we're in the mafia since we moved here. It's part of our charm," Enzo smirked. "If anything, news coverage and rumors will be good for business."
If I may,
I chewed my lip. Papa Joe said, "Young lady, we are beyond formalities. Speak your mind." Stunned and more than a little nervous, I leaned closer to the speakerphone.
I missed the beginning of the conversation. Did the contributions and bribe money come from the company or your personal accounts?
Marco narrowed his eyes. "Personal. Cash and sizable checks. Some went directly to Carter, and some went to his campaign."
How do you feel about Maggie writing a press release? "Dying man comes clean, exposes decades of political corruption."
Enzo stilled beside me. Gabe's voice rose. "Now we're bringing my wife into this?" "I fucking love it." Papa Joe laughed, coughed, and laughed again. "Maggie did a fine job on the first article she wrote about the family. This would be a short press release. Nothing fancy." Marco nodded. "This could be a follow-up. She can write it as if we're the victims." "No," Papa Joe's voice rose. "I'm no victim. She writes the truth." "The truth?" Enzo went wide-eyed. "Part of it, anyway." Papa Joe chuckled. "I paid for political favors. Paperwork to get pushed through without red tape. Laws passed that benefited the company. Gabe and Joe Jr.'s shoplifting charge to go away. I was 8, and Joe only got popped because he took the toy from me." Gabe chuckled. "I still don't like it, but this could work."
Never in a million years would I have thought I'd find myself liking Enzo's father. Yet I could see why people were so enamored with him. Like his sons, the man oozed charm.
"Send the financials, emails, and Maggie's press release. I'll leak everything to the media as soon as I get them." Marco stood and stretched. "Are we done here?" Enzo frowned. "Losing Carter will hurt the Abruzzos, but it won't stop them. They got to Terra. We have to assume they have other spies in our businesses." Papa Joe said, "This woman, the waitress, will she make a statement?"
That he'd suggest bringing the authorities into the situation surprised me. Enzo had seemed reluctant to do so the night of the party.
"She's scared. They threatened her kids," Enzo said.
"I spoke to her. She's agreed to give a statement to the police in exchange for you helping her start over." One look at Enzo and Marco's faces, and I knew I'd screwed up.
Enzo took my hand. "Testify in Sicily, to the heads of the other families."
Oh, shit. Maybe, my brain stuttered. How would I? Who do I tell her she's speaking to?
Nico covered her mouth to hide her grin. Gabe said, "The Italian authorities. And tell her she's getting a week vacation for her entire family in the beautiful city of Palermo." Enzo frowned at the phone. "We'll get the poison and the waitress on a plane as soon as the meeting is scheduled." Marco exaggerated a yawn. "If there's nothing else, I smell Hildy's sausage and mushroom quiche. I'm going to catch a couple hours of sleep." Enzo rubbed his eyes. Papa Joe had other ideas. "The Lazio's demands still stand."
My heart fell into my shoes. After everything we'd been through, Enzo could still end up married to someone else. Charming or not, Papa Joe rose to the top of my shit list. Nicolina glanced between Enzo, Marco, and me. Gabe, did my father specifically name Enzo as the Marchionni I was to marry? Yeah, he did. Gabe sounded as tired as I felt. Her face fell. I see. Marco shoved his hands in his pockets and stared at the floor. I will have a talk with him. Nico stood and smoothed her pajama pants over her hips. His demands are impossible. I am married to someone else. Enzo narrowed his eyes at his younger brother. Marco, for his part, gave him a Gallic shrug. Palms up, goofy face. I didn't believe the two were married, not for a second. Besides the 72-hour waiting period after they'd obtained a marriage license, Nico would need a passport and birth certificate. I highly doubted she'd had the documents in her back pocket when she'd arrived. However, I kept my mouth shut. That complicates things, Papa Joe chuckled. I'll leave it to you to share the joyous news with your father. Thank you. She sighed and headed for the door. Enzo gave himself a visible shake and winked at me. Good night, Pops. Marco lunged for the desk and hit the disconnect button before his father could reply. You married her? Enzo waffled between grinning and attempting to look stern. Not yet, but I will. He flashed us a too bright, almost maniacal smile and bolted for the door.
Chapter 34. Enzo. The clock to my right told me Shanna and I had slept through most of the day. The cat ass on the pillow to my left reminded me the view only changes if you're the lead dog. I lived my life in the middle of the pack. It was high time I moved up. Starting with claiming my woman. I scooted the orange and white fluff ball from the pillow, but the beast arched his back, hissed, and swiped razor-sharp claws across my chest. Son of a... Smiling, Shauna rolled to face me. He doesn't like you. The feeling is mutual. I attempted to kiss her, but Mr. Bouguer made a bizarre, half-growling and half-meowing sound. To think I was willing to pay 10 grand for the hairball's safe return. Give him time to get used to you. She picked the cat up and deposited him on the ground. Ignoring the phone vibrating on the nightstand, the mewling cat, and the footsteps in the hallway, I pulled her body against mine. Come here. Is there something you want? Shauna wiggled closer still until we rested skin to skin from our chests to our thighs. You, this, us. Tucking her beneath me, I slanted my mouth over hers and kissed her. I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment it happened, but somewhere along the line, she made herself a home inside my heart. Sliding her hand down the length of my back, Shauna whispered, I want this too. So much. Move in with me. I have a place in the corner. There's plenty of room for you and the hell beast. I'd never asked a woman for more than a date or the occasional one-nighter. Even then, I'd had nothing to lose. If they turned me down, life went on. With Shauna, everything was different. The woman had the power to crush me with a single word. Are you sure? She asked the question on an exhale. Completely sure. I moved to my side and stared into her dark eyes. And before you say it, the offer isn't for a couple months while your apartment is being fixed. I want you in my bed, in my house, in my life. You mean live together, live together? Her eyes widened. An all too familiar pain formed beneath my sternum. Did I push too hard, too fast? But your family. I rested my index finger on her lips. My family doesn't get a vote. Shauna nodded. Is that a yes? Yes. I'll live in sin with you. She laughed. There will be sinning, but I was thinking of something more permanent. I cupped her precious face in my palms. Not today or tomorrow, but soon. I want to marry you. Shauna swallowed hard and pulled back. Enzo, I don't need a piece of paper. Neither do I, but I want you to know where my head is. Her lower lip quivered. We've only known each other a short time. I agree, which is why I'm not suggesting we run to the courthouse today. Hildy says it takes only a moment to fall in love. She met my gaze. Emotions clogged my throat. I knew the second I heard you laugh at the gala, but it took me a while to admit it. Her eyes darted back and forth over my face as if she couldn't decide where to look. For me, it was the late-night calls. Once you fell asleep on the phone and I listened to you breathing for a half hour before I disconnected. I'd waited my entire life for someone to look at me the way she did. She lifted my mask and peered at the man beneath, and by some miracle, she didn't turn away. Ah, so I'm not the only one who enjoys watching the other sleep. Listening isn't the same as staring at someone. Laughing, she pushed me to my back and climbed on top. Enzo? Shanna? Marco pounded on the door. You guys decent? No, we shouted in unison. You might want to turn on the television. Shanna moved to my side and snatched my t-shirt from the nightstand, where it had landed earlier in the day. Once covered, she pointed the remote at the TV. The screen filled with what appeared to be a press conference. Grumbling, I stood and pulled on my jeans. Oh, you're going commando. She licked her lips as if debating where to bite. I don't intend to be dressed long. I opened the door without so much as a glance in my brother's direction. What's going on? Grinning like an idiot, Marco folded his arms and rocked back on his heels. I sent the press release about Pops and Mayor Carter to every media outlet I could think of. Oh, shit. I sank onto the edge of the bed. It's going exactly as planned. Better, actually. Since the news broke, people are coming out of the woodwork to accuse Carter of everything from blackmail and extortion to murder. We watched the coverage, including footage of officers shoving Carter in the back of a police cruiser. While most of the news anchors focused on the mayor, a few mentioned the Marchionnis. Surprisingly, no one speculated on her illegal activities. Shauna whistled. Maggie must have done an incredible job spinning the story. Don't sell yourself short. If it wasn't for your sleuthing, we wouldn't have connected the Abruzzos to the Carter in the first place. Despite the inherent danger of her job, I loved watching her in action. More importantly, solving the puzzles seemed to make her come alive. You should get your PI license as soon as possible. Maybe. Shauna's face flushed as she waved her hand. Seriously, though, I thought the reporters would eat Papa Joe alive, but they're acting like he's a hero. Marco's grin widened. That's because he's either golfed, played poker, or vacationed with most of the media conglomerate owners. She glanced between us. Is there anything the Marchionnis don't have their fingers in? There's a dirty joke in there somewhere, Marco smirked. Thank you for your restraint. I turned to Shauna. To answer your question, if it can benefit Pops, he's involved. I'll let you two lovebirds get back to whatever it is you were doing. Marco turned for the door. Standing, I clamped a hand on his shoulder hard enough to make him wince. Not so fast. Did Tara and her kids get settled? He wiggled out of my grasp. Yeah, I got a call around noon. She seemed happy with the place. Shauna furrowed her brow. Happy in the fishing cabin? It's a dump and not great for young kids. Marco chuckled. My father took matters into his own hands. He had her put in our vacation villa in Gulfport. It's 4 bedrooms, oceanfront, and behind a wall. Plus, he's ordered around-the-clock security for her family. She'll be safe there. Safe and pampered. Let's hope she doesn't expect me to set her up in that kind of luxury permanently. I would do right by her after she testified, but I was thinking about a starter home in the middle of Kansas. Willing participant or not, the woman had played a role in my brother's murder. I intended to keep close tabs on her until the Abruzzos paid for his death. That sounds a heck of a lot better than Jack's place. Shauna shook her head. Marco rolled his lips in and turned to her. About that, would your friend mind if someone else used the cabin? I don't think so, but I should ask. She tilted her head. Why? Nico and I might need to get out of town for a while. I wasn't going to ask, but he'd brought it up in conjunction with going into hiding. What the hell is going on with you and Nico? For the first time since he'd come in, the grin left his face. I don't know. After the performance Nico had put on for my father, I had no idea what they'd cooked up. Hell, I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. What do you mean you don't know? Are you planning to marry her or not? We applied for a license. I ran both hands over my head. Why? Why do you think? He sighed. Don't do this for us. We'll figure something out that doesn't involve you marrying her. Shanna crossed the room and stood in front of him. I don't know what she saw in his expression, but it made her smile. Unless you want to. Want to? He barely knows her. He doesn't. Marco glared at me. I can speak for myself. I'm not doing anything against my will. He likes her, Shanna mouthed behind his back. When did that happen? More than a little confused, I said, if this is what you want, I'm happy for you, but I don't have to tell you, her father may not feel the same. And you think Ma's going to throw you to a party? He glanced at Shanna. No offense. None taken? She dipped her chin. I folded my arms. Our relationship won't be a problem. If necessary, I'm prepared to walk away from the business and the family. Her eyes widened. Enzo, you can't mean that. What about your restaurant? Your family is... I'm a Michelin star chef. I can work anywhere. As for my family, my brothers love you. I hitched a shoulder. Pops didn't say anything negative about you on the phone this morning. I believe you impressed him. Would he have called me out with everyone on the call? Marco and I nodded. As for my mother, she has enough to worry about besides meddling into our personal lives. I had no doubt Gabe had given her an earful about her involvement with the Lazios. Marco said, Speaking of Gabe, I don't think he's going to be thrilled with you walking away. He's the one who suggested it. Bullshit. Marco gave me a dubious look. When did he do that? While I didn't appreciate being called a liar, I let it go for Shauna's sake. Before I left Sicily. Shauna's cheeks flushed. Did everyone in Sicily know about us? Afraid so, I winked. I'm stunned, but I guess I shouldn't be. Gabe's a stand-up kind of guy, and the two of you are good together. He sucked in a breath. About that cabin, why isn't it suitable for kids? She frowned at me before turning to him. It's deep in the bayou in Terrebonne Parish. And it's only accessible by boat? The place sits up on stilts, which is probably a good thing considering all the gators and snakes down there. Marco went pale. But they can't get inside, right? She had no way of knowing he was terrified of most reptiles and all spiders, but her eyes lit with mischief. I haven't been there in years, but I don't remember anything other than spiders coming inside. The gators and snakes won't mess with you, if you don't mess with them. He swallowed hard. Oh. I doubt anyone will find you. It sounds very secluded. I couldn't help myself. Teasing him as an adult was payback for all the nonsense he'd pulled on me when we were kids. That'd work, I guess. He nodded as if to convince himself. I'll call Jack. I'm sure he won't have a problem with you and Nico staying there. Marco turned and walked to the door without another word. Giggling, Shanna pressed her hand to her mouth. I think I scared him. He's always been afraid of snakes and insects, especially spiders. I pulled her into my arms. Promise me something. Swear you won't blame yourself for this rift between me and my mother. She did that when she started plotting with Pietro Lazio. I'll try, on one condition. She turned her face up toward mine and smiled the sort of smile men would go into battle to defend. Anything. Promise me you'll make friends with Mr. Bougere. He's going to be your stepcat one day. It's best if you two learn to love each other. He's pure, unadulterated evil, but I'll try. I leaned in to kiss her, but my brain skidded to a halt. Stepcat? Does that mean you'll consider making an honest man out of me? One day, in the not-so-distant future, I'll happily stand under a chuppah with you. I rested my brow against hers. I'll agree to a Jewish ceremony, as long as we agree to raise Mr. Bougere in the Catholic tradition.
Chapter 35. Shanna. 3 months later. Hildy was right. It had only taken a moment to fall in love with Enzo. However, she didn't tell me until a few weeks later that it took much longer to build a life together. I'd moved in with Enzo days after Tara testified against the Abruzzos. While the other families demanded Sophia and her henchmen return to Sicily, they'd yet to make a decision regarding a punishment for Joe and Rebecca's murder. 3 months had passed, and the place finally felt like home. However, it would take much longer for either of us to stop looking over our shoulders for the bad guys. Until the heads of the mob families doled out justice, the Abruzzos remained a threat. The bells at St. Louis Cathedral chimed 7 times, and I felt every one of them in my bones. I had minutes before guests would arrive to celebrate Enzo's birthday. Thankfully, I had a team to help me pull off the party. Maggie rounded the corner, carrying a tray of bacon-wrapped scallops. "Where do you want these?" "Beside the gumbo. And for Pete's sake, don't carry anything else, or you'll go into labor." I took a final look at the decorations on the courtyard. I'd worried over every choice, from the balloons to the color of the tablecloths. I wanted everything to be perfect. "I'm not due for another month. Besides, even if I did go into labor, it'd take hours before I needed to go to the hospital." She rested her hand on her watermelon-sized belly. Hildy stepped outside. "Everything looks wonderful. You've outdone yourself." "Thank you. Now all we need is the guests to arrive before the birthday boy." The doorbell rang. I smoothed my black sheath dress over my hips, drew a deep breath, and opened the door. Chloe and Ryan ran inside, followed by Zach and a girl I hadn't met. "Shanna, this is Sam, my girlfriend." The teen's ears turned red. "Nice to meet you, Sam." That's new. I glanced back at Maggie. "They grow up so fast." She stared after the young couple and sighed. "Where's Gabe?" "I'm here." He held Ella, his 9-month-old daughter, out in front of him with both hands. Unlike her father, the baby cooed and smiled. "Could I borrow one of Enzo's shirts? She puked on mine." I tilted my head and studied his black button-down. "Where?" He turned. A long line of wet, white goo stretched from his shoulder to his waistband. "Yuck! Yeah, go ahead." I might have bent my views on marriage when Enzo had crashed into my life, but kids were another matter altogether. Maggie hurried to him as fast as a woman carrying a nearly fully formed human being inside her could. "I'll take her. Go. Enzo will be here soon, and we have to hide." Gabe handed the baby to her, kissed her cheek, and started unbuttoning his shirt on the way to the bedroom. Dante, the youngest of the Marchionnis, arrived next. Rather than knocking, he opened the door and strode inside with his arms wide. "Shanna, good to see you." "Thanks." I drew him into an embrace and froze. Evelyn walked in behind her son. She raised her chin, glanced around the room, and frowned. I'd had no idea she'd left Sicily. Her presence filled me with dread and a million questions, none of which she'd likely answer. Thankfully, Marco came in behind her. He and Nico had been staying at Jack's place in the bayou for 2 months, but he'd returned to the quarter once a week to handle Marchionni court business. Marco draped his arm over his mother's shoulder. "Lighten up, Ma. It's a party." "There are no decorations, no food, nothing." "Ma, go look outside." Marco glanced at me and rolled his eyes. Evelyn walked to the courtyard doors, forced a smile, and marched to me like a woman in need of a stiff drink and a long chat. "It's wonderful you're doing this for Enzo, but he doesn't care for people to make a fuss over him, nor does he like surprises." "Thank you for your advice, but I disagree." I spotted Ann Dixon in the doorway. "If you'll excuse me." Ms. Dixon and I had become neighbors once again. She'd moved into Gabe's townhouse while my mother's construction team repaired the building. "Thanks for coming." Hugging her, I whispered, "And for saving me from Enzo's mother." Anne gave me a knowing look. "Don't let her bother you." "I'll try." Marco rested his hand on my shoulder. "Sorry to interrupt, but I need to talk to you." Anne took one look at him and shooed me away. "Go. I'll catch up with you later. Go." His concerned expression made my stomach hurt. I took his arm and pulled him to a quiet corner. "What's up?" He ran his hand over the back of his neck.
I have it on good authority. Nico's father is sending her brothers to bring her back to Sicily. For her safety and mine, I won't be coming into the city again until things settle.
That Pietro Lazio hadn't demanded she return before now surprised Enzo and me. We'd expected the situation to come to a head weeks ago. If Marco's sources were correct, he and Nico were in danger. Serious danger. I lowered my voice. You should have a security team with you.
No one will find us in Terrebonne Parish unless they follow me to the cabin. Even then, it's easy to get lost.
He brushed his hair from his brow, and a shiny gold band caught my eye. As far as I knew, the couple hadn't tied the knot, but I'd obviously missed something. Drawing him into an embrace, I whispered, "Congratulations! But you might want to take off your wedding ring before your mother has a coronary."
Oh, shit. I forgot all about it. Thanks.
Marco slid the band into his pocket. Are you too happy? He hitched a shoulder as if his and Nico's relationship was no big deal. But his goofy, love-sick expression told a different tale.
It's complicated.
Laughing, I motioned around the living room. Enzo and I are living proof that complicated doesn't mean hopeless. When are you leaving?
I'll stay until Enzo arrives, but I need to get out of town today.
I hugged him tighter. Be safe and call me if you need anything. I'll need a map, but I'd be happy to bring you supplies.
Thanks. Don't tell Enzo until after the party. I don't want to spoil his birthday.
He released me and headed for the courtyard. I turned in time to see my mother and stepdad in the hall. Mom, glad you guys could make it. She hugged me tighter than necessary. How could I say no? I wouldn't miss your big day for anything. My day? I pulled back. The party is for Enzo. Her eyes bugged and she covered her mouth. Right. Mrs. Isaac! Maggie saved me from the awkward moment by dragging my mom to the courtyard. Come meet my husband and children. Mom glanced over her shoulder before walking outside. It's Mrs. Goldman now. Leo and Dahlia slipped in during the strange exchange. Both gave me a quick wave on their way to greet Hildy in the kitchen. Hazel, Enzo's assistant manager, and a few other employees from his restaurant arrived, along with Jessie and other family members I vaguely remembered from the wedding. I walked outside to check on the food situation and to welcome the guests I'd missed. My cell phone chirped and my heart leaped into my throat. The text I'd been waiting for blinked on the screen. Jack and Enzo were a block away. Everyone, he's almost here. Time to hide on the patio. Waving my arms like a lunatic, I said, "Stay out of sight until I bring him outside." I turned for the door and caught Ryan and Chloe taking turns swiping their fingers through the cupcakes. Thank God they didn't get into the birthday cake. You're supposed to wait for Uncle Enzo. Both children gave me doe eyes. You can each have one cupcake, but you have to hurry and hide. How in the heck does Maggie keep track of them all? The kids ran to their grandmother with a cupcake in each hand. I slid the door closed and drew a calming breath in and blew it out. You got this. Male voices outside the front door sent my already frazzled nerves into hyperdrive. You don't have this. What if Evelyn's right? What if he hates parties? I vaulted over the back of the couch, situated myself, and tried to look normal. Tried and failed. Enzo came in first. He took one look at me and chuckled. What's on your dress? Glancing down, I groaned. How in the hell did the kids manage to slime me with icing? Nothing, just a little something I whipped up. Jack lifted a brow. Please tell me you aren't cooking. Enzo gave him a grin that told me he agreed with Jack's assessment of my culinary skills. When he turned back to me, he folded his arms. Go change. I'm taking you out. Out? I couldn't breathe. It is my birthday, after all. Sure. We can go out.
Think, Shanna, think. I, started the grill. Could you turn it off while I put on another dress? You only own one dress. He arched a brow. Fine, I'll change into jeans. Go turn off the grill. I stood on shaking legs. Jack can turn off the grill. I'll help you change. He moved closer, but I sidestepped him. Enzo Marchionni. He's a guest. Go turn off the freaking grill. Jack knew I had people hiding in the courtyard, but did nothing to help. He's here so often, I should charge him rent. Enzo lunged for me. It's my birthday, and I want to see you naked. Wrapped in his arms, I widened my eyes at my so-called best guy friend. Jack made a show of looking at his watch. Maybe I should leave you two alone. Good idea, Enzo said between kissing and biting my neck. This can't be happening. His freaking mother is probably watching us. Please, just go outside. Please. So my entire family can yell, surprise. The devil himself couldn't have smiled as wickedly as Enzo. You knew? I batted his shoulder. Who told you? I swore never to divulge the identity of my informant. He wiggled his brows and took my hand. It was my mother, wasn't it? I never should have called her. The woman can't keep a secret. Don't tell her I told you. He pulled me toward the door. I made a mental note to avoid sharing secrets with my mother in the future. Although, her gift of gab could be useful if I needed to leak information. Enzo walked outside. Surprise! Our friends and family clapped and cheered. He pretended to startle before laughing and shaking his head. I had to hand it to him. He deserved an Academy Award for his performance. Happy birthday! I forced a smile. Enzo grabbed my waist, yanked me against his chest, and laid a not-safe-for-little-kids kiss on me. When he released me, I made the mistake of glancing at his siblings. Dante narrowed his eyes and nudged Marco. The brothers folded their arms and shook their heads. Dante called out, "He's faking it!" Gabe and Leo nodded their agreement. The kids booed. Enzo took a bow. All right. I knew about the party, but I have a surprise or two of my own." I didn't know if I wanted to laugh or cry. I'd worked my tail off to pull this together. While he didn't seem disappointed, I damned sure was. I turned to go inside to change, but Enzo caught my hand in his. He dropped to one knee and stared with the same expression he'd worn the first time he'd told me he loved me. Several people gasped, but I couldn't take my eyes off him to figure out who. Shanna, you've turned this place into a home. Because of you, I see the world differently. I'm closer to my brothers, have made some great friends, and discovered I can, in fact, love a cat. Every nerve ending in my body sparked to life and demanded I answer him. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from answering before he finished his speech. He alternated between wrinkling his brow and smoothing it, as if struggling to hold back his emotions. I've loved you since the first time I heard you laugh. You're the kindest, bravest woman I know. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I thank God for every morning I have the pleasure of waking up next to you. He cleared his throat. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I couldn't get the word out fast enough. Yes! Cheers and applause erupted around us. Enzo shot to his feet, lifted me from the ground, and spun me in a circle. You've made me the happiest man in the world. Gabe's voice rose over the rush of blood behind my ears. Did you forget something? Enzo stopped mid-spin and muttered a few Italian curse words under his breath. Ears burning as red as Zach's had earlier in the evening, he set me on my feet and dug in his pocket. The Marchionni brothers in the crowd laughed and elbowed each other, but I'd come to understand their razzing was as much a sign of affection
as their bear hugs and slaps on the back. Enzo opened a pale blue box to reveal an antique ring I'd spotted in Jack's shop. The diamond was hand-cut, so the shape wasn't quite a circle or an oval. Small stones surrounded the larger one and continued around the thin platinum band. I reached for it, but hesitated. It's beautiful. It reminded me of you. Stunning, unique, and delicate but strong. Enzo took the ring from the box and slipped it onto my finger. He gave me a half a second to admire it before kissing me silly. Once again, our friends and family cheered. Much to my surprise, Evelyn joined in, but stopped when she caught me watching her. I'd given up trying to figure her out. Despite the fact we both loved Enzo, she'd likely never accept me as a daughter-in-law. As far as I was concerned, it was her loss. We'd make a wonderful life for ourselves, with or without her approval. Everyone please enjoy the food and drinks. I need a moment alone with my fiancé. Enzo pulled me into the house. I'd expected him to kiss me again or take me into the bedroom. Instead, he motioned to the couch. His serious expression seemed so incredibly out of place, it sent a chill down my spine. Sit, please. There's something else I need to share with you. Okay. I perched on the edge of the cushion. Enzo pulled an envelope from his breast pocket. What is that? I wasn't sure I wanted to know. It's from the Louisiana State Board of Private Investigators. Because you have documented proof of your dyslexia, they've agreed to allow you special accommodations while taking your test. A wave of exhaustion crashed over me. I wanted to forget the party and our guests and curl into a ball under the blankets. I loved him for trying to help, but he didn't understand. I went through this in school. They'll give me extra time, or put fewer questions on the page, or read the questions to me. But none of that will help. When I'm nervous, writing the answers trips me up. They've agreed to have a proctor read you the questions and allow you to respond verbally. He set the envelope beside me. I thought about everything he must have gone through to get the board to allow it. You called my mom to get my records, didn't you? Enzo nodded. How could I refuse him when he'd done so much? I'll try, but promise me you won't be disappointed if I fail. I bought you an insurance policy. He grinned, and I frowned. If you somehow bribed the proctor, nothing like that. Taking my hands in his, he said, Alex has agreed to rehire you. Last I'd heard from my former boss, he didn't plan to return to New Orleans, regardless of what happened with the Abruzzos. He's coming back? No. He'll bring on a licensed PI if you aren't able to pass the exam. He dipped his chin and tilted his head. But if you do, he's agreed to sign the agency over to you. I sat back and let the information sink in. 3 short months ago, I had been unemployed, homeless, and hopelessly single. My life had changed in huge ways. I had a fancy house in the quarter, the possibility of my own agency, and a man I loved dearly. But it was the small things that I treasured the most. The way he brushed his thumb over my cheek before he kissed me. Nights on the sofa watching movies with Mr. Bougere snuggled between us. Cooking together, joking around with his brothers. My heart is full. Thank you. I draped my arms around his neck. For this and everything you do. You've given me the one thing I've always wanted, but never had. A big family. He whispered against my cheek. It's me who should be thanking you. I've always had them, but I was too afraid to let them in. You're still grumpy and hard-headed when you want to be. Yes, but at least I'm no longer the ghoster. My mouth fell open. Who told you about that? Being a part of a big family means nothing is secret for long. He pressed his lips to mine. Outside, the party went on without us. But when he kissed me, nothing else mattered. Enzo's soft lips, stubbly jaw, strong hands, and his wicked tongue were all I needed. The sliding glass door opened and 4 Marchionni brothers marched in. "Enough sucking face. We're starving, and Ma won't let us eat the main course without you," Marco laughed. "What was that you said to me before my wedding?" Gabe tapped his temple. "I remember now. You called me a sap and asked if I was sure I was ready to be tied down the rest of my life. Funny how the tables have turned." "You are a sap," Enzo grinned. "Did you see tears on my face out there?" "Wait until she's walking towards you wearing a wedding dress," Gabe said as he and Leo pulled Enzo away from me. Dante and Marco each offered a hand and hoisted me to my feet. Enzo grinned over his shoulder. "Big families also mean there's no such thing as privacy." "Bring it on." Laughing, I followed my brothers to the patio. Thank you for listening to Highball and Chain. I hope you enjoyed Shanna and Enzo's story. Curious to know what the heck was up with Nicolina? Will Marco ever stop goofing around and find love? Will the Marchionni brothers break free from the mafia? Get your copy of Single Malt Drama now to find out. Here's a hint. It all goes south after a fake marriage and real honeymoon in the bayou.
This has been part 3 of Highball and Chain. Written by Kathryn M. Hearst. Narrated by Aaron Shedlock and Virginia Rose. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please subscribe to Kathryn's channel where Enzo and Shanna finally get their happy ending. While you're there, be sure to check out Kathryn's other novels.